flood. When fears come in and flood your mind. When you think you're going down. When you think you're not going to make it. When you think you're going to fail God. Or you've not measured up. When the enemy comes in and tells you that you're unworthy, you're unholy, you're no good. You'll never get it. What do you do when the enemy comes in like a flood? You see, the Lord raises up a standard. Let me show you what that standard is. Look at verse 1. The Lord reigneth. He is clothed with majesty. The Lord is clothed with strength, wherewith he hath girded himself. And he's put on his armor and set for battle. You have to have a clear vision that your Lord and Savior is standing by. His eyes on your flood, his eyes on you. You have to have a clear vision of what God has promised here. I've not ignored you. I see where you're at. I see what you're going through. Look at me, he says. I have girded myself. I put on my armor. I have my sword in hand. And then read what it says, verse 4. The Lord on high is mightier than the noise of many waters, yea, than the mighty waves of the sea. God says, get your eyes off the flood, get it on me. I've got my sword in hand. I am more powerful. I am mightier than all your floods. I'm bigger than all your fears. Get your eyes off your fears. He said, I've girded myself. That hit me. I could hardly sleep. I picture my Lord standing over me, sword in hand. He knows how far it can go and no further. He'll come and slay the dragon in his time. He's saying, now you just stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. You just put your trust in me right now. Don't be afraid.
All right. All the glory to God. Hallelujah. We are here to prove the evidence for our special design. Welcome to Proverbs Guys Ministries. This is the ministry where we'd like to point out the fact that evolution is a mental illness, and we want to help heal you guys. So, hallelujah. And Dan, my very good friend, the show is yours, sir.
Hello, Dan. Welcome to the team.
Hello. I'm hearing voices echoing, but that's... Am I there?
You are here, but why you weren't hearing any echoing so far, but why are you hearing echoing now? Oh, I get it. You have you have YouTube open where you were sharing the link. You must have it open on the background.
Ah, yes, your YouTube tab. Well, to quote a very famous creationist friend of mine, evolution says that technology should get better with time, but we don't observe that.
Tech person. You can go around. You said I have a tab open on YouTube, which is echoing.
Aiden freaking Linden, welcome. Good to see you out there, my friend. Maud, you are here in the house.
Wait a minute. Is that wait? No, that's good. Wait. I don't hear it. Have I closed it yet? Actually, my tech girl.
Well, can you hear me echoing, or do you just hear one of me?
Echo. No.
I think you're good, Dan. I think your lovely wife / tech person has situated it for you, so we're ready to rock and roll. You know what? I'll tell you what. I think this whole thing got thrown off. We're going to do the intro video again and come back fresh.
We're good. I think.
All right. It's all yours, buddy.
No, we're good. It was my phone.
First off,
I gotta have some kind of mess up.
First off, before you begin, Dan, let me just address this so people get this better. This is Dan's show, but we had no time to make intros, make thumbnails, make all this stuff. We've been very, very busy. So just consider that you've watched the Dan intro. There was a Dan thumbnail.
No.
And now you're gonna watch the Dan show. So overall, this isn't a ministry-wide organized project of I'll bring this, you bring that. Nothing. This is things that Dan wants to share with the world and us as well, because we haven't watched, we haven't seen. We're trying to organize it so he can enjoy his first show presenting his case. So I hope that was a good intro to make others catch up to what's happening. And I'm going to check if all the videos are uploaded yet. Oh, you changed the... Yeah, we had to play the video. So let me see. Going back to that one. Yeah, most of them are up. There is only one more that it wasn't ready yet, which was the garden part 2.
Garden part 2.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. The echo has gone. But that's kind of normal in my head, but it still makes it harder to talk. Welcome, everybody. I just like to start in a word of prayer and thank God who I serve, that he gives me the joy and really excitement about this subject, and would hopefully use my voice to communicate because all you guys know me, I'm not the best communicator. And we just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So a little bit, I've met a lot of you guys out there, and so a little more about myself. I'm a landscape contractor who has done competitive landscape, flower, and garden shows for years, and one of the most, here, record this one, I'm one of the most awarded landscape garden show designer and creator in the world. Now, the secret is it doesn't pay much money, so there's not that many people stupid enough just to do it for free. So the pool is small. It's kind of like the abiogenesis scientist. There's not too many of us out there. So that's it. But I have fun with it. There's a picture of one of my award-winning, I think that was my second or third award, Best of Show in... Actually, Sonoma County Fair has one of the largest themed garden shows in the country, probably 4th or 5th, for a small little town north of San Francisco. And so it is highly competitive, but highly fun. I'm able to do what I want without people over my shoulder, basically. And so through the 45 years, I've trained other people to do what I do. And so the secret, and people are like, will compliment or whatever. This little cabin there, I saw a picture of it. I heard it talked about when I was growing up, that out at my mom's ranch, 40 acres, it was 80 acres in the redwoods. There was a redwood stump about 15 feet around that they built a cabin on. And my grandfather lived in that. And then I heard my dad lived in that one, because actually he's the one that said, oh, I lived in that thing too. Had a little platform over the stump and a little... I would think it's probably a wine cellar underneath it, but we won't go there. And so my theme, so part of design is you get concepts. And basically we're starting, if you look at that, that's like an old hangar building. You can see up there where I'm trying to hide some of the metal stuff. So when people view my garden, some of the non-beautiful stuff is hidden. So I got up there and put a big old log over that beam so that when you look at my water feature, you actually saw a water feature and not, that would not be your focal point. And so through the time, I think this one, you can tell I had my daughters help me through the time. And so the people, especially my daughters, could all be award-winning. One of them decided not to be that dumb, but the other two, award-winning landscape designers, and it's because it's something I could teach them. I designed other also, and we'll see some pictures later. I've helped other people. My wife is a bachelor's in economics and law degree from a pretty Distinguished College in the Philippines, came over here, and now it's like, oh, so nice, mainly because I'm old, but she can just take things over. And but it's the eye, it's looking for design, is looking what the features are of design. And did I send you the definition of design in the dictionary there? And if you do, you can put that up. But this is one. It was a show, a Christmas show. This isn't just a warehouse, kind of a what do you call it? A hall, a rental hall at a veterans building. We turned it into a little snow theme for a Christmas show. I've done probably 4 or 5 different competitive shows, though. This was just a fun thing that I volunteered to do and got a lot of help doing it, a lot of creative people. So those that are creative among us, and everybody really is, you learn how to tie your shoe. And so we actually can create stuff, even if it's that small in life. Some of you are into the engineering kind of zone, the lawyers, or doctors. Dennis, thank you for that, because you need to have a little different brain function than the strictly artist person and personality. So Achilles, did you see a thing on the definition of design? We'll see. And then I probably should do kind of my, I did have an actual thesis thing that, because that's what you're here for, is to hear my opinion.
I was muted, and I was trying to say that I do have one of the emails is called design, and it only has this picture in it. And then there is another one with something of a definition, but it is among other things. So I cannot actually share as it is, because it's in the email, it's text. It's not somewhere on the internet, but I can read it.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
So I have the email which starts with a testimony, and then you say my thesis is.
Oh, good. You can do that.
Okay. So Dan's thesis is that what the observable, testable, and repeatable science shows is what the observable, testable, and repeatable science shows is that it is most reasonable to think that the overwhelming evidence we have points to an intelligence behind everything. The acknowledgement of design is not debatable. We can all hold hands on the evidence and agree. The debate is on the interpretation of the evidence. We have 2 choices. First choice is an intelligent designer / creator. Second choice is the design is a product of chance, randomness, unguided phenomenon. Then you go to outspoken atheist Richard Dawkins.
I'll read that because I got to skip through some of it because I got a lot of, I love actually Richard Dawkins. He's a smart person, but he is also will say what he thinks. He says what he believes. And so some of the ones is, and sorry, you guys will have to, you'll probably just have to look up the quotes, but they're well-known quotes, mainly to do with his books. And one is, of course, that, let me try to scroll down here so I can see it without going too far, is that biology, because I want to read it, so I'm not getting some out. But biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of being designed for a purpose. So appearance meaning that, and actually he has some other quotes, so I don't have to interpret what he says there, but that's pretty obvious. It's nothing. Come on, go down.
I do see a designer behind this garden. I don't know if people
and that's true, and that's where I'll try to get to after, and to build on that thesis that we can even see that in nature. And then, and darn it, I have a help.
I even see Jacob's ladder right there. I'm just saying.
Yes. Oh well, and thank God that gravity didn't help me out on my designing of that. So and then here's another Dawkins quote, and I'm sorry if you guys pick out words, and they're out there. But this comes from one of his books, page 157 and 8. And I don't know if it's the Watchmaker or the Mountain one, but one of his books. One of the greatest challenges to the human intellect over the centuries has been to explain how complex, improbable appearance of design is in the universe. There was a comma in there and it didn't, that's what I said. But anyway, he said it more intelligently. I was hoping to have some intelligence going on because I was going to read his stuff, but oh well. Another, the temptation is a false one because the designer hypothesis immediately raises the larger problem of who designed the designer. The whole problem is my fat fingers on scrolling this, but that was an editing. That was not part of his. So the whole problem we start out with was the problem of explaining statistical, oh, you guys got that word, improbability. It is obviously no solution to postulate something even more improbable. So he's saying that the improbability of biology happening and he actually uses luck or chance, I think it was one of the other, that life came into existence. And so he's saying, and hopefully we can get these posted on a link somewhere someday because they are really cool quotes that is not really, I mean, it's actually what I would disagree with, but I know, I can see where it's coming from. And so start out with it. Actually, how did I do that? Okay. So one last one or two. Yeah, he just, we discovered, man, sorry about this, everybody.
You're all right, Dan.
Oh,
shake it off.
Yeah.
Oh, nothing.
Shake off the stress.
Nothing I can shake off except for these clubs. So the most ingenious and powerful, and he calls it a crane, a device, like so far discovered is Darwinian evolution by natural selection. So he's even quoting more than the genes and the DNA was actually just the natural evolution by natural selection. Darwin and his successors have shown how living creatures with their spectacular statistical improbability and appearance of design have evolved and by slow gradual degrees from simple beings. We can now safely say that the illusion of design in living creatures is just that, illusion. And so that is what I'm going after because it's nothing controversial. I mean, I've read enough, seen enough, talked to enough of my friends. It's like, that is your hypothesis. I would kick back and will later that, you know, there's actually, that scientists have actually shown us instead of just having more expanded evidences for evolution. But I'm going to go with the evidence of creation and see how that is a better one, even with Dawkins's words that the improbability of and others, I don't want to pick on him only, there's other smart people, that the evolution is improbable. Life is improbable, but it's less improbable than a creator. And then going on down farther, goes, that shows us that there most likely is not a creator. That's a paraphrase, but we know that's his belief and where he's coming from.
Well, and if I may just briefly, Dan, this kind of goes into what we were talking about earlier this morning when I told you about that article I saw that was trying to explain the Big Bang, and they're now explaining it through a massive amount of dwarf Big Bangs. And even then it comes back to a creator. There still has to be some sort of ignition, right?
And that is their problem, is because, you know, when I tell you how to design something, I'm going to tell you it, and it's there. You can argue with me, but you're not going to say, well, but it might have been a Big Bang, or it might be multi-universes. It might be what you were talking, the new one you heard. Somebody the other day said it was an eternal universe, that the universe has just always been here, and eternal is still being argued. So, but the fact is that there isn't one excise scientific thing. The only consensus within Darwinian is that there is no creator needed. Now, even with Dawkins here, which I will go head to head with a smart guy, which that shows I'm not very smart, but is that the design we see is so complex and so vast that the improbability of biology happening without a creator is made larger by the improbability that life could even form in this galaxy. They use the term, and actually this was on, we don't have to play it, but there is an actual Hawkins quote that the biggest problem they have is the fine-tuning of the universe. And you know, he called the Goldilocks, even used the term Goldilocks sphere. And so if we look at each one of those, it's like, yeah, okay, it just happened. So, but then when you have it, that the big expansion, and I'm going to start that. All you evolutionists, if I hear you guys say Big Bang again, I'm going to smack you. The great expansion, because I think we're all smart enough to get real terminology with what we're doing. So I don't trip up in those words, and thank you. That's just my dyslexia. I get on words. So the expansion had to be just exactly the right amount. The temperature, the force, all that had to be the right amount. The speed of it. So we have the time, space, matter, and energy would not have been here if it wasn't precise. And I'm not the statistics guy. And so, yeah, they have this statistics, and Dawkins even alludes to that, and they all do. But usually it's pointed to one thing. Oh, well, sure, that happened, but it happened, so it happened. We don't have to worry about the statistics on it. But then you go through then our own galaxy, the amount of stars, the gravity, the speed of light, all these, the laws of the universe had to be exactly within a small, precise, whatever it's called. Thank you. And to get us a planet. So we have our solar system. The sun had to be just right. The earth has to be the right place. The moon has to be there for our tidal and the tides, and for the core to spin properly. Our soft core. It's just not just a few things. You can say, yeah, I'll spin the dice. I'm not a gambler, but you know, I'll hit the lottery. But then if I'm hitting a lottery every time, then the improbability, and to see Dawkins' argument that the only reason the improbability of life without a creator is the impossibility to explain the origin of the creator. And I'll save that because that's such an easy one that we don't need that one yet. So that is the premise. That's where we're headed. Let's see then. And so, but my thing, since it is the design aspect, it won't be one, like Dawkins was just talking about biology. Other people have talked about the fine tuning and that, but when you crop them all together, and now that we're, you know, looking farther in, and you have the, you know, new theories on little stuff smaller than the cells, smaller than the makeup of cells. And then so, let me kind of scroll down. And then, so I should have had my helper do the scrolling.
Well, in your defense, Dan, you expected evolution to evolve it to be better. So Maybe we just didn't come out like a billion years early or something. I don't know.
You
It'll
know,
get better.
These hands, you know, actually on a thing kind of that if as doing displays, you know, and stuff, you've got a time limit. And my daughters, if they see, they'll be laughing because they've seen me up there. Usually at Santa Rosa, it's a 12 p.m. Cutoff, and I'm there scratching with my hands, digging in plants, and that will get on to the design. And so now we got the definition of design. What is it? Design is to create, fashion, execute, or construct according to plan. Design is a system for, and it's a system. Another one, and this is from Merriam-Webster, to conceive and plan out in the mind. And then they're telling me examples, which we don't need. And to have as a purpose or an intent. So as you can see, even the definition, and it goes through a bunch of them. The only one, now there is the one down below, and I'm gonna get some little hands to scroll for me, hopefully. And but you get down farther, and there is the one like flower design or like design in waves, which is part of the definition. So I didn't want to leave out any of them, but so my point again, even with the amount of design we see, and I'm sure because it's an argument against the intelligent designer because we see design in the sand, in the waves. And so that we would call simple design. And then, so that we can get away with just forces of nature, still doesn't help the whole complex design of the universe. And getting a planet that is good for life. And so I'm trying to point and look at the same time. That's a little bit farther up. So then, but then when you multiply the amount of design, I'm not a space guy. I love looking at the space and stuff. But so we have laws of nature that, you know, give us a cause, because go back up, everything that we see has a cause. And so as a person who has experienced the personal contact of God, you'd say, when I'm this nice guy, people know me. It's like it was easy to attack me when I was just typing because I'm not a good typer, and sometimes it does sound pretty strongly put. So but let's get to know me. I'm would be the stereotypical nice guy. Always been, probably because I had old brothers that beat me up, so I had to maneuver people without contact to stay out of pain. And so with that though, I'd have, you know, oh, Danny, you're such a nice boy and all this stuff. And it was in my 20s. I still had oh, Danny, what high school do you go to? Because they thought of me as this nice little kid. But inside I knew there wasn't anything good in here. Nothing good inside of me. And so it was the experience, you know, that biblical experience that that gave me and took me from that spot. And I really, you know, forgive me, guys. We go from experience. So some of my friends, I was like, you know, you guys are in the dark. I shouldn't say that specifically. I know how I was feeling without Jesus. It was a dark place. It was not a nice space to be in. And so, no. And after that experience of confessing my sin, you know, seeing how bad as a person I was, that I want to make people happy all the time. I couldn't do that. And it's because of me, not because of anything else. And so, you know, after that experience, I got the love, the joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control that, wow, I just like, it was like a light turning on. So with that though, I'm still imperfect. some of my comments, you guys, and I don't know, some of my friends, it's like, okay, sometimes I don't think before I click send. And so I'm still imperfect though, but that's part of the gospel. That's what the Bible says. And so it wasn't that I looked in the Bible and said, oh, I'm not perfect. And that's what's inside of me. And it jives with the Bible. Actually, I was going to read before we get out of this part and back just on the design is the Romans chapter 1, which is kind of, is that a thesis actually in the Bible? And to me, the Bible has a lot, and even people that don't believe in a God know that there's some pretty cool stuff in the Bible, even though it was read by, ignorant people. And so I was going to have somebody.
You have a preferred translation, Dan?
No,
I'll put up whatever one you prefer.
Yeah, and then it was going to get read.
Okay, and we're going to let Sister Awake. Okay. Oh,
thank you.
We've already got it up. Beautiful.
We're organized around here.
Yeah, really.
And Awake will be our reader.
Okay, 18 to 20.
Oh, 18 to all the way. I don't mind.
No, 18 to 20. We'll we do have some
Okay.
people that are here for design talk, so I don't want to.
Okay. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived, being understood by what has been tiny on my phone, by what has been made, so that they are without excuse.
Okay, too late.
Very cool. And so, and I do want to apologize because I will, forget that this Bible is written for me. It's written for individuals. So this was my experience. And sometimes I do project that on other people. And I do apologize for that because you might not have that experience. You might not feel imperfection or the purpose. The other thing part of, and we'll throw that in right now because it's fun. I can do it. I'm leading this thing, is part of the definition in design is purpose. And so when we see that, and I'll get back on my experience. And then Achilles, do we have a video of one that's, I think said Hessel Church? A little video which shows, getting into the mind frame of somebody who wants to design something. If you are designing, and I'll go with yard. That's what my thing is.
I'm looking at them. I think I have 5, 6 videos. And do you mean the one that says "Be grateful for the intelligent design"? I think this is about the eye.
Oh no, this one would be one that has a picture of a sign that says like Hessel on it and some information. But anyway,
you either didn't send me or I missed it.
Okay, that's all right.
I have one that says "Complex Design Demands" and something. The title is it's not complete here. The molecular machines, DNA animation, dragonfly, and the garden with the banned word that we can't pronounce, but it's written here and I can pronounce it.
Let's do that one then, because that's actually, that'll be good. I can explain the other ones because it was kind of fill time, so I didn't have to talk as much. So do that one though. That will give you a kind of a never of how you can be taught design, and at the same time, it'll teach you what we're doing. It's not a bad word, but during the time we were doing some maintenance at, and you can pop it up there anytime. We're doing maintenance.
It will mute you if I bring it up. It will mute you. You cannot talk over it.
Well, that's okay. Nobody in the comments. I do have a wrench, and if I see anybody in the comments,
don't worry.
And if they're clapping on that one, I will come get you. If I get shut up and you clap.
Well, I already made a sacrificial lamb out of one of their own. So if they're stupid enough to clap off,
Oh no, I'm teasing.
Steven will clap back on.
Leave them on unless they're doing like
No. I feel
vulgarity.
like Sherman headed to Atlanta. I'm scorched earth, Dan.
Oh, it's my show though. You said that. So.
Okay, fine.
Unless they're
fair
vulgar,
enough.
'cause I know there's going to be kids watching. So guys, there's kids watching. So you know, bring it to me, bring it to us. But yeah, try to think like you're talking to a 5-year-old or 11-year-old.
We're marking the questions that are coming in for you, so you can address them at the end.
Oh, sweet.
So I will press play and try to unmute you and see. I think we're only getting muted at the intros. If we play a video, I think I can unmute you and you can talk. So let's
let's go for it. You can see I'm organized, and everybody's gonna. It's not them guys. It was me. I finished doing this at about 2:30 today. So Achilles is
and
a
then
miracle worker.
So let's try it out.
We're here at Mom's Apple Pie in Forestville on 116, and we had to transform their little picnic area in.
Okay, you can get unmuted only if you unmute your microphone, because
good, because
me,
a lot of this.
To me, it says that the guest has muted their microphone, but I can unmute mine.
Okay, cool.
So you can unmute and talk over the video anytime you want. Pressing play.
We're here at Mom's Apple Pie in Forestville on 116, and we had to transform their little picnic area into a little garden because with the virus, we cannot have outside seating without hiring somebody come in full-time, clean, sterilize, for good reason. So we have one of the designers, Philip Posey, going to point out some things. So Mr. Philip, so what are you showing us there? This is his design. Say it loudly. The floor. And then you want to, what's this right in front of you that we put in there? Right in front, right there.
A picture frame?
A picture frame.
To another dimension.
To another dimension.
If I stick this in here and look over here, the man might not be here.
The man boy, yes, it might not. And then over that way.
And it might show.
And over there, Philip, you're going to show what you did to make that ground not so gravelly. Walk over there and you can point. When you get there, turn around. Turn around and face us, show us what you did.
We made this steps.
Say that again.
We made these steps to the tractor.
To the little toy tractor.
If you come here, caution, do not ride the tractor. You will fall off.
Yeah, this is just a design for people to look at, not to play with.
This is the after picture, and I'll show you the before.
The before picture. Okay. It looked kind of chaotic, didn't it? And what did you do to make it look like a little walk path? You straightened it up. Made a little turn. Nice angles. That's some mathematics, huh? Yes, look at that. Uh-oh. Look behind you. Do you want to straighten those two? Get the angles right?
And I didn't know about this when I was little. And I used to pretend these were two dominoes. If I wanted to go sideways, I would just put it sideways.
Oh, instead of little angles. Yep, you're growing. Okay. And you should probably, well, actually that's okay over there. There, that was to get rid of a lot of that gravel. So then we have some focal points. Best thing in gardens is focal points. Whether it's an Asian garden that has one or two. this way, something for the kids to like, something for the artists. You gotta look here if you want to say something.
This is 2020 and my name's Philip.
It is 2020
July
in July.
14th, I think?
I think it's like the 16th, but we do not know. It'll show on there. All right, and then so a little plow kind of for the whole apple theme, even though they don't those plows in apple farming, but you got the picture. So here we go. So from the outside, you'll come on up, and instead of a sitting area, you'll have something nice to look at. Down the way, we did different angles connecting the split rail posts to the barrels, keep them secure. Boop, 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 boop. Gotta secure that one more.
All right.
And that's what we'll do next. Go around, check things, and come here. Look on in at Philip's floor.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Take away a lot of the gravel. And I told him probably the reason he did it is I told him to go put those back on the
You can pause it.
trailer. We'll haul them off. And he goes, no, they should be in
I
there.
can't pause.
So I think it
It will
turned out
stop.
cute.
We can stop it. That's far enough.
And there we go. Some depth.
We lost 10 seconds, but it's okay.
All
Yeah.
right. So I talk as bad on video as I do in person.
I was
So anyway.
super good.
So no, my daughters, and I love them. They actually edited some of the stuff you read, so it sounded like it was coherent. And so yeah, they're good. They want to get me scripted in one of these days. But I'm so excited about getting things out. So background, you had the virus hit, shut down the eating areas. Once they started to open, they would have needed an extra person. When I said we, that's just because I'm working there, that I don't have any affiliation with them besides getting some money for trying to make them happy with my landscaping. So they had me do a little design. We couldn't do the fair that year because of the shutdown. So we had fun just doing that. And so where you can see more things in design, the purpose, this functional purpose was to keep people not thinking what happened to the picnic tables. And then also having something that was pleasant to look at in focal points, gives you feelings. A lot of times, so I like Rust. I look down back in my childhood and second generation, third generation immigrant, in the redwoods, self-sustainable, the depression, a lot of rusty stuff around. So that gave me peace as being a little kid. So I was well fed. I got to play out in the redwoods and the creeks and stay away from my brothers. So that helped. And so with that, Rust brings me a nice feeling. Now, a lot of people, if you're medical mind, engineer mind, that, numbers person, Rust probably gives you some creepy feelings. And so design and art gives us different feelings. So the purpose is so multifaceted. And so as we design, and as you saw, Philip, I just had extra wood that I used that for structure. And he came up with the idea, let's just stack it and use it for a floor. Very great. I mean, super from, I think he was 7 at the time. And that took a part of my purpose is getting rid of gravel. And I would have had all that gravel. And in my mind, it would have been like, okay, there's too much gravel in here. The old wood did make like a little deck, covered up gravel. The little stepping stone boards was his idea. He just threw them in there. And so we can create, even though he didn't know my purpose, he did it. And the design, so I had the bigger scope. He didn't care about people not having a picnic space. He didn't comprehend that. He didn't comprehend that I needed structure. I mean, if people were going to walk on that, we couldn't have done it, but we had it fenced around. So the purpose and his design fit in with that. If that was outside of my little fence structure, I couldn't have had him do it. And then having him working on it, hey, Philip, let's make that path to the little toy tractor. And he just by himself just popped it in. And so even that has been taught because he'd been around it. He was in the baby carrier when we did San Francisco show, all these different shows. And so it's easier for him, like a musician, to learn music or something that with parents that have types of gifts. And so it's just very cool. So then I look, and I didn't have those pictures, but 2 of my daughters went on to do their own gardens, their own competitive. They were too smart, going, why am I doing this for no money? And so, but they did great, conveyed through their creation, their design, their engineering, different facets of design in one little garden. So if you move back to the one with the cabin, and then you couldn't really see it, but there was a water feature coming down where I posted, where I covered up the ugly focal point of that beam. And so with that, yeah. And so when you look straight ahead, you would all, still the ugly roof, but the beam kind of tied you down. So people probably didn't know the purpose. It looked kind of cool, but I wouldn't have done that because it was, kind of dangerous and stupid. My daughters are smiling right now. And then, but it covered a big beam. So even though people came and saw, wow, that's cool, it brought your eye appeal all the way up in the sky above you. There was a reason I did that, even though nobody else did it. So part of design and creating is not really needing people to know. So one example of that is, and I know people always have that critique, is like, there's stars we can't even see. Why did God put them out there? Well, I'm no God, but in my gardens, sometimes, so behind that barn or a place that nobody else could see, like one of them, I had a future past was my theme. It was a space type of thing. They had a big spaceship over the top. And my theme was to make a garden that was past. So I made that a natural, kind of look like this garden here. And then a future where I had the water feature coming down in rust. You could have seen it out in the redwoods. One of my gifts, and nobody really wanted to compete with me when I had a natural redwood theme or a forest theme. Most of my best of shows were around that because I could convey the feeling. People could think they were right there. And that was because of a design on a concrete floor and an ugly building. And so in the future past, so I had this, and then the water feature coming natural, then I had it spill into a mirror, a mirrored trough. So it looked really futuristic, I thought. And they did too. They gave me the best theme at that time. And then, so you go with it. But back in the back, I had this, it was a plastic, it came out of a store. It had candy. It was a cheapo container, green alien guy that had green alien candy. And I got the empty container and I sat that back in the garden. Now you could actually see it if you look through a log, through some brush, through some plants and flowers, and you could kind of see green. You didn't know what it was, but I put that there just because it amused me. So there is parts of design that you might not know why it was designed, and that the designer just did it to do it. And so with that, and the complexity we see, that's why I would say that there was a mind behind it. So we go on though, and then do we have the one of it was a tropical display. Did I get that one to you? It's a water feature. We took out and the owner said it was about a $30,000 water feature. It was, but it was in this huge space. It didn't really fit. It looked like you could have popped out that water feature, put it somewhere else, and it would have been just fine. It didn't fit the area. And he liked tropical, so we made a tropical.
Now, Dan, quick question. How
Yes.
much of these gardens were from a designer and how much of it was from random chance of explosion?
Okay, you are talking to me, so there will be a debate on that.
Okay.
And the explosion really is the fireworks inside my brain. But no, and that's the argument, in that that again, sea waves, snowflakes, ice crystals, design, beautiful design, but simple design. I mean, you know, I can imagine that just happened by forces, even if I couldn't go back and say what designed, what created the time, space, matter, and energy. Because, you know, that's what even this evidence of science seems to say, and which, again, points me, and so they'll say, oh, well, you tear down evolution without a God. Well, you guys do that yourselves, because if you had the evidence, we wouldn't have to say multiverses, or the universe is eternally large and timeless. So, but I am giving a evidence and expounding on the evidence why creation, why design demands a designer. So did we find a video with some palm trees and good stuff? He's up all the time. Boy, he's probably asleep right now. It's 2:00 in the morning in Greece. Anyway, I will give you that. Close your eyes, imagine. So we're in Northern California, redwood forest around. And so not really a tropical area. Okay, it's not tropical at all. The owner wanted tropical. He's great guy, worked for 20 years, didn't put much into this property, had enough money to sink a good chunk of money. You can see it on my YouTube, a tropical design. I think I posted it, but seeing different facets of a water feature. Now, let's go back. Well, do some pictures. We have some other pictures there that flop through them, that because these are all pretty well done. I was trying to get, I think I had some pictures that showed, as a judge of flower shows, is what I would look for. So I am looking for aspects of design that were faulty. And that will get into the argument people have, is like, well, God didn't create this too well. There's bad stuff. And then that's where I would agree with godless evolutionists, that change has happened. The world used to be a big different place. There's, as we see, tropical plants all over the earth. The earth somewhere was different in past time. And so he wanted a tropical in Northern California. So as a designer, I have to pick some stuff that will take our area. There's a few tropical, and we'd call them tropical because they have big leaves. They give the appearance, and that's where the appearance comes in. They're tropical looking plants, but a lot of them aren't tropical. So you'd make the big leaves, you give them, we had some palm trees. We had to get palm trees that don't die in the freeze. And so that would fit in a Mediterranean climate that has about so many days of freeze a year. In the wintertime, it looks pretty dead in certain places. This year it was mild, so it really held up well. And so, but with that, so if I came, because I oversaw it, but in my mind, I'm always going for more of a redwood. Luckily, my contractor friend, Mermaid's Garden, who partnered with me in a little art adventure we're doing, and he took over that project and made it more tropical because he's into, you know, themed tikis and that type of stuff. So he oversaw it. I just kind of gave him some aspects of the job that made it look natural. And so the water feature was, you know, double water feature, went into a 3,000 gallon koi pond, and he put gas lighting in it, so tiki torches, and was incredible. But you go into his backyard, and he spent a lot of money, but in his lifestyle, it wouldn't have been too many trips to exotic islands, and he can walk out the back door. So in mine, I'm creating something that well, one thing, live. So if I just created stuff and it all died the first year, that's not a very good designer. You know what? If I could have plants that look tropical, and then they could take the freeze too, whoa. And especially as a horticulturalist, if I could hybridize that, because we know plants all the time are hybridized. And I would get like, I'd be a billionaire because everybody would want me. But you look at it and it's like, wow, we look on the planet. What is the design in the planet? You've got plants, seeds that are designed. Well, I would call it designed. They are designed, whether it's without a designer or designer, that will take the freeze down to the cold. They will take pests. We have one of the coolest, and I, like I said, I'm so excited about stuff. We can actually put up the dragonfly. We were working one day at one of the clients, and a dragonfly came by. He only had 3.5 wings. And people are going, oh, God's got a bad design going. Well, I don't know how things were originally designed, but a 3-winged dragonfly, it's 3.5-winged dragonfly. Can we show that video? Here we are in the.
I'm sorry, I was waiting for the moment to press play, and then you said something more. All right, you have something to add? No,
Go
just
for it.
press. Okay.
Here we are in the garden, a beautiful yellow butterfly bush, but that's not what we're looking at. We're doing a little bit of redo on the gardening. Look what my wife found. He's in love with the shovel handle. Look at that guy. A 3-winged dragonfly. He's probably at the end of his life, but he is incredible because he's flying around still. What kind of engineering must it have taken? Helicopter pilots out there, what do you think? What happens if one of your rotors totally breaks off? What's your chances? Check out this guy. Let's go to white because he's gonna, hopefully he's still in there enough to fly around. That's wrong direction. There we go. But he flies not as fast as I've seen others, but there he goes. Look at that. He is still in flight. Knows his senses, going down, going up. Well, he really likes that shovel. Try it again. Yep. There he goes. So 3 wings. Look at him go. I can see him. They're still so fast. There he goes. He's located. Still flying. That's incredible. There he comes. So he's already flown 3 times and come back to the shovel. See if he comes back to his shovel. It might look like the flower. There he goes. Amazing little guy.
That is so funny.
That quite engineering. So we got a random mutation times how many? Look at the wings, those paper thin wings. the compound eyes, thousands of eyes processing every little thing he sees. It was girls will lay the eggs and then have metamorphosis happen, where little guys are under the water, live under the water for up to a couple years, eating insects, bugs, fish or little aquatic life. And then they come out and they're nectar suckers. Incredible. And can fly with part of his wing just torn off. Beautiful little guy.
No, don't send her away. Let's say hi.
She's jealous. We went to church today and we left her at home. And so when I got home, she was just like telling me what for. Now she's not getting away from my side. So yeah, so when we look at that, and so then there's the argument is like, there's things that are badly designed. Well, for number one, you don't know why they were designed that way, and you don't know that the design hasn't messed up. One of the probably the worst. I did a water feature for a statuary place. They put their little statuary frogs around it, whatever, aquatic type statuary. And owner calls me up and goes, "Hey, Dan, the water feature is empty." Well, I did it on top of ground, so it could be changeable. It was more of just a display unit. So I had it built up on pallets as the waterfall, and then a wooden frame down below. And I get there, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's what's up. And I'm looking as a designer. I also had to engineer. It's like, did some of the liner fall and water come out? And I looked around, and there was a nice rat hole right at the bottom of the waterfall before it fell down into the pond area. And so the little rat just thought that was a nice little chewing spot. He probably wanted to shower, and he got one. And but just because somebody would have come there and go, "Wow, that was a bad design. Why didn't you have it blocked in?" Well, it's because the environment changed. The reason I created it wasn't for a rat house. But the cool thing is in natural design, we see stuff like that something will go extinct, some volcano or something will go off, catastrophic something, disaster goes off, but stuff comes back. Stuff is designed, even though in my belief, it wasn't designed to, it was designed to do that, but its purpose was not to go downhill and fail. But to have a creation, so if my water feature that the rat had done, it already popped up another flap, and then the water went down, and the whole creation, because if that was my world would have been dead. But to have a design, because I have that in my mind, I've had other problems like that. I know when I did it, it wasn't a permanent installation. And so when I see that, then I see creation. I see Mount St. Helens went off. This type of stuff that devastates the environment for a bit, but it pops back in. And so I see that as a higher form of design, which even takes a higher intelligence. And so you look at that with that, some of the things they say, oh, the eye was designed badly. Well, even in the evolutionary time frame, it was different back then. It changed over time to get us to a point where the sun rays are, and different things are, or worse, there's different pollutions in the water now, that and so many other little examples. But you can't go for the things that are looking bad, because there's 3 or 4 things that, it can't be a creator because that thing's bad. Then you look at, on the other hand, you got to look at the other hand on the total, and to say, well, because the eyeball, I don't like the design of the eyeball, that means that little dragonfly could have popped into existence through slow time, through small, gradual, undesigned, unguided chance mutations, then you'd have to say, okay, well, that's fine. Then show them to me. And I've had that out there for a long time. And we got to go peer-reviewed papers because I know somebody's going to come at me and it's like, you don't have a doctorate in design. It's like, no, just 45 years of award-winning and the brain for it, and not the brain for school. And I'll be discounted. So I've been asking for peer-reviewed papers of just a small amount. I'm being kind, 100 to 1,000 mutations that have added information. Because as a designer, can you pop up the one, any of those, whether, I think actually the little mini machines inside the cell. So as a designer though, anytime I see those videos, I'm looking at like, how could I make that? How could I duplicate that? When I go out into nature, and the reason I've been a good creator is I've been able to reproduce nature. So when I'm judging a garden, I think this is in the rabbit hole. I think this is actually explaining something earlier. When I am doing a garden or judging a garden, the appearance of design has to be there. Go ahead. You got that.
This sounds a lot like the first one. So I think we should start with the molecular machines and then go to the one with the garden that is you're getting into right now. So let's show the design that you see in molecules. And I don't know, maybe atheists out there, they don't notice that. So let's show them.
Well, they do. They do. It's just
right. And then the other video that says complex design demands, which is what you are getting into. So that's why I interrupted you to play one and then lead us into the other one.
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
There's no talking, so maybe I'll work. So you look at all those little pieces in there. That is like one of the gardens. That's the flowers. That's the rocks I use. That is, there's that little power plant. And that's like the pumps I would use. And so each one of those parts, I could
It's been called one of the wonders of the molecular world. An amazing nanoscale machine. ATP synthase is a high-tech micromolecular power generator.
Yeah, we can cut it. He talks better. He talks better than I do, and I'm jealous. So
I think this could also be copyrighted if we allow it to play the whole thing.
No, I was just kind of I just needed pictures of it, but that was really cool. So if you think back to my gardens, and you can show one of those, they're just little pieces. They're pieces put together for a purpose. And any one of those ones you can put back on those pictures of some of the gardens. And so as a designer, you look at my garden, and the reason I got Best of Show is because the theme was Green Valley. Green Valley is a redwood community, or redwood forest with a little community. And so my purpose was to do the theme to reproduce a piece of Green Valley, California, in this old, it looked like an old airplane hangar, concrete floor. You saw those metal ugly walls. So when somebody came by, they would get the feeling, get the thought that they were right there. And I achieved it pretty well because, and second thought, as you see those flowers, that's not the representation, but it is a flower show with a theme. So take away the flowers and it would look perfect, Green Valley. But so you look at that, and if you look inside there, you won't see any anything that shouldn't be there. And if you do, as a judge, those are all in little pots still, mostly. And so if I see a pot as a judge, I'm going to go, that's not Green Valley. There's no plastic commercial landscape pots, nursery pots in Green Valley, sticking in under the redwoods. And I'd knock that down because that's giving me the feeling I'm not there. And so you take this, and then you went over to the building, which was the representation of the little cabin over the stump that nobody else knew about. That was just the designer. So people are going to think, oh, that's kind of cute. No, that was my grandfather. That was kind of a tribute to my family and my mom, actually, because she was raised there. No power, anything. But, you know, that was a tribute to her. And for her, I took this, it was a 2-inch. If you know, back in the day, there was little extra pictures you could get when you go to the store, and they're about 1.5-inch square. And Kelly's, if you want to put that little cabin thing back on.
Yep.
So, so I had the natural part there, and so over here was the cabin. I had a guy helping me out, and so you can see the brick up there in front. My oldest daughter, who, you know, I'm not a color guy. Actually, my wife dresses me now, so I look halfway decent sometimes, but color's not my thing. I just love color. So I'll throw in, you know, and they'll tell me, it's like, oh, orange doesn't go with whatever. And you guys that know color would tell me. So I just picked out flowers, and I had my daughters, and I think only one, I think my other daughter was doing it, but I think two of my daughters helped me on this. I'll give them 3 because they always did anyway. But so on the texture, so we had the brick though. My daughter was already, with that pretty part with the water feature, she was already done. We had the cabin up, and we had like 2 to 3 more days to finish. And my buddy comes in and doing the brick. And so he's the one that did the cabin, which is just so awesome. But he started doing the brick, and he got his levels out, and it was like, whoa. I was kind of letting him go, even though it's not what I would have wanted because it's a redwood theme. But it was like a day, and he was still leveling, and I kind of like, yeah, we're good. I just threw some plywood down, started throwing bricks on, and that's why it looks uneven, like a brick patio out under redwood trees would look like. And so as you come though, so you look at that, if it was too perfect, I would have knocked it down as a judge. But I was having a guy help me, and so I let him kind of do his own thing. And because he did such a perfect job on the cabin, and it was tough for him because I was like, no, I don't want it square. Take that square off. Just throw that piece of wood up there like it's a cabin that's 50 years old. And then we did have a cutesy little old-fashioned bathtub so that kind of threw in a cutesy thing, but of clawfoot bathtub in that greenery there. But again, things that you can't see, you couldn't really see stuff from the behind issue that as a designer, I just like throwing in detail. And so you look at this garden, but then you go back to those little, you don't have to do the video, but back to the little machines. So in this, I had a bathtub running water. That took a little pump. I have the old-fashioned lantern and one in the window back there that actually came. I don't know if that one actually did come, but my folks had that. They gave me that for displays, and I put wiring in them. So I had to figure out and design and engineer some wiring that's not going to burn out, that's not going to burn down the shed. I had some issues in other shows, but we won't go there. And so you look at the little machine, the little inside the cell. You've got just pieces. And to think though, and I'm using material that's already made. It's already been, the pumps are already designed. The lighting and that stuff is already designed. It's there just for me to buy and kind of cut up in little pieces to make it work for what I wanted to do. And don't tell the state OSHA about that because I'm not doing the shows anymore, so it doesn't matter. But so you look at that though, but you look at the little cell. I could design that. I could reproduce that by the parts and with help, because I have help when I do stuff, who, like a Dr. Tours or something. Hey, how does those chemicals go together? Well, we know all the parts. And so to think that the complexity, and not just little, it's not sandshore. This is high complexity. It makes my garden look like 2-year-olds. And so you look at that though, and then so that's just one little piece of complexity. Then you have those cells fitting together. And so you have to, back to my challenge. I knew I'd get back to it. I tell people, it's like, okay, I'll buy the thing, because I have that feeling of love, joy, and peace and thing from God, but there's a lot of things I sacrifice. And if there's no God, there's no reason not to sacrifice things that on a whim I feel like I want to do. And so that whole moral issue, the design of morality, the design, it's a design, whether you think it popped in or it was created. The design of right and wrong, that's all design stuff. How did it get into our brains? How to do that? But again, if you just think, oh, well, it's just mind, it's just morals, it's just tongue, it's just this, but it's all together and it has to come together. Then we throw in the coolness and my horticulturalism. And people know me. If my friend's watching, I was over at his house and I picked a worm out of the rain and put him out into the yard. Sorry, Blue Jays. But life is incredible. And so it would be easy to think that I could design some kind of robot-y thing. Well, I couldn't design it, but I could help if I got the experts to do it, because it's all in here. It's all in here. Yeah, we could do that, but then how do you do that at the same time to be underwater, above water, to be able to change in the environment? Because we all believe in evolution. There's a bunch of different breeds of dogs. But then the argument is, well, we have a bunch of different breeds of dogs. You got your whatever you designed. And someday I think AI probably will evolve through very highly intelligent designers. But how do you get that in every environment? If that guy dies, though, he's already reproduced. We can, I can see someday them being able to reproduce mechanical things. I got a good imagination. But you'd have to say, it's like, well, gosh, that is so much diversity, so much change, so many symbiotic relationships. You look at things like one of the best examples, and if I go dark, it's because Maxine's going to be pushing my thing over. So pet her with one hand, keep her away from the cords. But you look at on those structures and anything that's designed, it's so highly complex. It's so diverse. You've got the symbiotic relations, like I was saying, in the plants and the animals. And the plants can evolve a lot more and faster. Oh, we've seen that, but they're different structure. They're using photosynthesis. They're using being able to root. You could cut off a plant's arm and put it in the ground and it pops out a new root. We can't do that in humanity. Cloning is starting, but it's the totality of the design is, and back to Dawkins, is, it's improbable, but this God guy is even more improbable. But that's where I agree with Dawkins 100%. The God that he's making up is impossible, because the God he makes up is in time, space, and matter. Because if you're saying, how do you create this God? Where does he live? Who created him? You're not talking about eternity. You're not talking something outside of time, space, and matter. This is not my idea. It is rejected because, it is hard to imagine that when you do believe in a creator, that he probably, and especially the beauty, the design, the purpose, because going back, the beauty, there's no design. I mean, for humans to see beauty, no reason to have it there. Concepts, imagination, you're saying the chimpanzees are there hitting things with stick or using tools with stick, and then that's kind of one of our cousins. And then the apes are like pounding each other's chests and stuff. And then, so where's the gradual? Back light. Everybody's probably wondering my challenge, the mutations, the millions or billions or trillions of mutations that would have happened from an ape or whoever our And that's the great thing too, always science. And so I've been into it. They go, oh, you don't know evolution. No, because it's always changing. I started learning about it back in the 70s in high school. If we did have that nice little tree that had the chimpanzee, sorry, I thought it was a monkey. That was my mistake. The chimpanzee with the ape guy and going up, and it's like, it's a stair step. There's nothing gradual about that. So you got to convince me as a designer that, that's fine. If you want to go slow gradual, you got to give me more than those charts. That's not slow gradual. Excuse me. And then you can see I'm excited. Can you give me that water? Oh, I get choked up about this. And but the challenge is where is, and I've had some really, good discussions with people. They usually kind of always tell me I'm a jerk and ignorant and I don't know anything because I've had, there's bacteria that change. Oh, that shows that I came from pond scum. Billy, my ancestor was pond scum. Okay, well, okay. What else you got? Oh, lactose intolerance. Okay. Yeah. So I can drink milk now, and my Asian wife has a hard time, but I don't see that giving me enough information to get back to evolve to some simple thing. And we don't even know what the simple thing is. That's probably, and I should talk to Dr. Tours because he always goes, it's impossible. Well, evolution says there's something way before that they're imagining. I shouldn't do that. That's me. Me as a person, not you guys. Is that first life is not what we see today, because everything we see today is way too complex to have been the first thing to pop into existence. So then another one, great one. There's multiple bacteria people have showed me, and it's like, okay, that's not really convincing me too well as a designer that all this is what created, because whether, again, it's a creation, whether it was created by somebody or by these processes, you got to convince me as in science instead of Doc and saying, well, we're pretty sure there's no God, and where I feel him in my heart and have been transformed by that message in that book. And it's a library of books. See, I did the same thing because they were like, oh, the Bible is circular reasoning. No, it's a library of books over 1,500 years, over 3 continents. So it's not a book. It's a library of books. So anyway, tangent. So if you get on the other mutations, now the other two, and I laugh about because, they have to come with, but they have to tell me because they got to have something. One of them, I was told, was, and a peer-reviewed paper, HIV/AIDS. Because if you get HIV/AIDS, you don't get something else. I think it was West Nile virus or something, or some other disease like that. It's like, you know what? I think I'll go for the West Nile virus. Thank you very much. I don't see much positive information in that. The other one was sickle cell anemia. And that to me, again, and if you have sickle cell anemia, it mutated your cells so they look like a sickle instead of a circle. And now malaria can't get into your sickle cell because it has to have a round cell to get into. Again, I'll go with them. I'll fight the mosquitoes before I go sickle cell anemia because I don't want deformed kids. And again, that is not going to help strengthen the design, the evolving design we see in nature. So guys, that's, keep on coming with those. But actually, since the AIDS and sickle cell anemia, everybody's been silent. So anyway, they tell me I don't know evolution, and that's that, and I'm ignorant, so they're not going to look up these mutations. It's the foundation, natural selection, and that's why it's kind of interesting because you look at the mutation rates, you look at the things that the changes, the diversity, the symbiotic relationships. It's just so much complexity in design that I don't see it. And as a designer, as somebody that looks for design, you're not gonna be able to convince somebody that actually will give you reasons that, yeah, I can do this. I can build this thing. I can create this because I'm a creator designer. And you even give me all the little parts. And it's like, it's not there. And so even Dawkins, where he goes, oh, well, the best thing ever, even though it was improbable, is the natural selection. And so it's like, really? He's like almost in the modern times. And so how do you get natural selection without these mutations? So, and it works. We see natural selection. That's why we got like the different breeds of dogs, different breeds of, I'd say, well, different humans. They don't call them breeds, but Darwin would have. But different persons, I could say one human race. But if you look at an evolutionary, there's evolution between humans. And on that standard, if you think, but then you really have to, as a designer, I'm going to go, well, how did I look different than my beautiful Asian wife? And I would say, well, there were some mutations in there. Okay, that's good. Some argue that with the amount of DNA, it was actually programmed in to begin with. Billions of characters of DNA letters that and you can only tell me that they happen by duplication mistakes mainly, that I copy this section, put it there. And it's like, man, I'd love to see me be able to do that in my garden up there. Yeah, I got a piece of wood there. Let's throw a brick over there. And but it doesn't happen. And neither does just saying that it's natural. It is a living organism. It makes it harder, not easier. Because I could throw a bunch of bricks there, and some actually I won't pick on that because this does look good. There's some of my gardens that look like I just did throw them down, and so that's because I didn't take enough time with them. But that was a designer big time error in that. But making it looking into things. People, when you look at the videos. And somebody time checking me, I can talk to my friend yesterday for 4 hours, and it was like, boom.
You're doing a great job, brother. We are all amazed on how well you're doing on your first show. This is a great presentation.
Oh, it's my first online, but as my poor friends on chats know, I can be annoying and keep going and going because I do want to figure things out. And even as a designer, I don't put that as a designer. I just care for people, and you'll see me in chats, and I won't stop because I'm actually. Why are you saying that? Why are you saying what you're saying and believing what you're believing, especially when it gets to morals? So the design of this garden up here, like I said, it's like nothing. It's like a thumbnail. Well, no, thumbnails are pretty important because I kind of scratched into the dirt with my thumbnails to make these gardens. I don't know. I've seen, my best buddy, he doesn't have hair. So humans have evolved to make hats. So you really don't need hair. But so I'm more like hair in the scheme of things. And, but you look at it and you look down to the most minute stuff. Or one of my favorites is worms. You'll see earthworms in my videos, how to how to raise earthworms. And they're incredible. They don't eat. They really don't eat. Earthworms are incapable of eating. They have bacteria inside of them that eat the junk they're going through, mainly organic matter. For the bacteria to eat, that's what they're surviving. If the bacteria disappeared, there'd be no earthworms. If the earthworms disappeared, those bacteria would disappear. And so
it's interesting, if I may interrupt, it's interesting in cases like this one and in cases like the termite who eats all the wood, but it cannot digest the wood, and it has bacteria in its stomach that live off that wood. The termite is eating the wood for a different reason. He is creating a nest, and the bacteria in it are eating the wood, are digesting it. So in cases like that, which one of the two evolved first? Did the earthworm evolve and then bacteria formed within it? What happened to the first earthworms that didn't have the bacteria? How did they survive to give the next? So
no, exactly. And we see a big diversity in earthworms. We see a big diversity in spiders. And then but that is really, I mean, is an example, like I said, with my garden. I don't care how much you want that to look like a tropical garden up here. You're not going to get it. It can't change to that. It would have to be, I mean, I guess you could if you had turntables and plants popping out and popping up. But it is what it is. And to get then a system that can change those bacterias that, and that's an interesting one, the bacterias that, the super bacterias. Well, they do change for the antibiotics and stuff, but a lot of that is more like stealing from one part of them to be resistant. And so when they go out, that's why they want you out of the hospital quick, because they get out with the normal bacteria dudes and they'll beat the heck out of them because they're not strong. They have a little niche that, yeah, if there's no bacteria because they're getting all killed by the chemicals, then they survive. So no, even their examples, it's like, guys, you got to give me more of a foundation. And for Richard Dawkins to say that his best example is that natural selection is like, wow, I scratched my head, because he was asked before about the my wife just showed me the smallest little monkey from the Philippines, the tarsier monkey. She knows how to get me off track. Cutest little things. Those are the ones with the big old bubble eyes. They're like that big. They're like, so, anyway, back on target, dudes. She was supposed to keep me on target. So yeah, where was I? She's laughing. And, but you look, oh yeah, the mutation stuff and that, and so you're and I know we don't like natural and unnatural, I mean, actually living and material explanations, being switched around, but the natural selection is just a mechanism. It is the screw guns, the nails, the hammers, the bricklayer, the getting there. But so without those bricks, we wouldn't have had it. The natural selection does not work. So it's kind of a bait and switch. It's like, whoa, we got this natural selection. That's how we got all this diversity and symbiotic relationships. But and the only reason it does it is because of the working on mutations. Okay, I think that mutations is a very important idea in the whole thing for me as a designer to wrap my head around, to say, oh, okay, yeah, we could do that. I could design that. It's all in my head because, of course, chemicals, as they, as Dr. Torres recommended, is that, yeah, you've got laws of chemistry that attract things, but also it doesn't keep them there. Once I built my garden as an example, and this would be a good example because chemicals are not living either, there were some things, because of me, they stuck together. Because of my daughter, those plants stood up straight. And so, but you're thinking if you just had all those pieces, all the bricks, all the stuff, that is more of just the would be the mutations, like all that different stuff, different pieces to use. But then the natural selection, and I might have this wrong, but it really works in my brain. But you need both of them. You need the natural selection, but you have to have the pieces. Okay, that's right. So all those little pieces there, the bricks and stuff, that would be the mutations. I would be and my family would have been the natural selection to select those little pieces. Because if you go into this garden before, there's just masses of stuff out on the floor. All these 12 different gardeners, they have all their flowers, plants, trees, just all out in the paths because we need the space to work. And so natural selection does not work. My crews could have been there, and actually, sorry guys, a lot of times they were, and I didn't have material there. I didn't have the mutations. I didn't have the plants. I didn't have the stuff available for them to work on. And so natural selection is zero in the big picture. without enough material to work on. And so that's where I'm going. Am I making? Oh well, it's an hour and a half already. We can.
Want to play that video with the garden?
Sure, let's go that one, and then we'll close up and I can have some questions. 'Cause I don't think at Hessel Church had a little design. We had this nice huge building room for fellowship, but county demands landscaping, and they wanted to take some water and get it so it'll sink down, percolate down into the ground. So they required this little system here. Asked me to design and do it. We got about 30 or 40 guys and women come and throw this in a day, and pretty much nobody had the concept. I put it on paper. Nobody had the concept down, and so made it flow as a creek. There's a pipe there comes out, but then had it look like a little dry creek bed. Great on maintenance too. And then that is it. But to carry out a design, you have to have a concept and a plan. And a purpose. And so on that one, and then in this case, I think it was 40, 50, I don't know, 60. It was a lot of guys showed up, and they had no, even the head guy, great guy, keeps that building, did a lot of stuff, had no concept of what I was doing. I wrote it on paper. I tried to explain it to him on that system for diverting water and trying to get in the ground. It makes that pond. And then if you saw grass on the other side, the pond fills up, which is going to leach down, but then it allows water to escape over the little dam, which goes into the drainage system and hopefully will save some of the water to percolate down. And so they had no clue, and so, but it was fun. I knew the purpose. They knew the purpose. They knew what the whole thing, they wanted to look pretty. They wanted it to be inexpensive. And so therefore, it was really fun. I had guys that actually knew how to plant. There was a couple guys that, just took over the planting. Said, hey, put a tree here, put the plants there. And they could have done that, but they submitted to me where they knew. One guy was a contractor who loves to plant. But he's like up here to me down here as knowing stuff. But again, he didn't know the plan inside my head. He just saw the drawings. Luckily, we had a guy with that design there, to come, and they kind of like, and at one point, they're looking at the plans, the county plans, and it's like they're starting to do something we didn't have material for. And I did have to step in and like, no, guys, that doesn't show that on the plan. And so they're taking their little pieces, because actually it was in rock. It was rock. And if we used the rock where they wanted to, that didn't call for it, we wouldn't have had the nice little creek bed going out the other side. So, but it's another evidence that even something as simple as that landscape, you had this high building. And so as a designer, I have a purpose. I got to make that thing look softer. It was like a fort. It looked like, we were going to walk around it like, going around whatever that town was that the walls fall down. Philip, my son, he'll know that one. And so who'd they run around? The walls fall down? Jericho, thank you. Looked like Jericho. I mean, this tall wall. And so as a designer, then part of my purpose is making it softer. They just needed the people in charge just wanted the county to be happy with the water thing that they demanded. And they demand some trees and stuff. And you'll see there's no trees. It's a nice enough building, but I had the purpose to it. Maintenance, those rocks, you'll think, oh, that's a cool looking little creek bed. It's nothing special, but it was what it was, but it's got weed cloth under it. It's got the right drainage. So any of the water coming on that one side is going to go away. So I have the purpose in mind. They had no clue. My little rock walls to give levels, they had no clue what to do with that. But once they get done, they thought, wow, this is gorgeous. And now I know what you're doing. And so that for me, and the hard thing is, and why I like to do these fairs is because I don't have to explain to people. You know, I get to customers and they're going, why are you doing that? I had one time, and dude wasn't even paying me that much because I don't like, well, anyway, my wife's here to do the money, so that's good. Don't think anybody's gonna get a deal now because she's smart. And so I did this. It was a fake creek bed, dry creek bed that went under a sidewalk, or under a entrance walk, not the sidewalk, just the homeowner's sidewalk, and then went down. It was probably 100 feet. And when it was dug like a utility trench. And the owner, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I need some money. He's going, what the heck? What am I paying for? I mean, it was a lot of work, but you know, he had this utility trench that I promised him was going to be this awesome natural looking creek bed that would take water away. It also had a purpose because there was water coming down that hill. It could get in there and not go under the house. And then so the second week, it would be taking 3 weeks to do. And so made mounds, trees on top of the mounds to give you the appearance, because it was a utility ditch. So the water wasn't going to escape it, but I gave the look. I gave little mounds with trees on it to look, oh yeah, if that water goes there, it's going to make that bend you're doing because it's got a mountain there. And so using techniques of design, and it was like the third week, and he's like, here, let me pay you everything. And it's like, no, if you pay me, I'm going to leave. I've got other jobs to do. And so I'm working for money, even though it's an artistic thing. And so he didn't understand. And then it was like, oh my gosh, you know, he's just like mind boggled because he could feel what I did. It was a feeling. Now that utility trench, I could know that was going away because that was an ugly feel. You have some open utility trench going through your yard, doesn't give you a peaceful feeling. That's the other thing with the design. It can give you peaceful feelings. What do you mean? I can design that garden there. That's really peaceful for me. If you imagine you had to live in that, though, you'd probably think bulldozer, dude, because I designed for me in this. If a customer, it would be all like perfect if that's what they wanted. Some customers do like the rustic look, but it gives a feeling. I have a person that works in a dentist office that now has said, well, I appreciate your work, but I can't stand it because my mind is so crazy. I do a lot of focal points. It's the purpose to make me feel good. But if I did that with a customer, I will not do like the little garden around Mom's apple pie. I know that people would be like disgusted by it because it really makes your mind work, and where you guys can probably tell my mind is going. I like a lot of things to focus on. And but it makes a feeling, you know, and people like an example is in your design and with the feeling. You have a little river, you know, for most of you guys in the East Coast, it's a creek. It's not that big. Russian River, named after the Russians that were landed up north of here. And but I almost drowned in that. I think I was about 8. Jumped off this pier, thought I was all that, and there was no bottom, and some kid like pulls me out and goes, oh, I saved this kid. And you know, the Russian River doesn't give me that peaceful a feeling. Before that, yeah. The creeks, I love them. Splash through them, design them, make them, but it gives me a feeling. And how is that? Then that is an actual design aspect, is making feelings out of your art, a purpose of giving people feelings and emotions. Again, another layer of complexity that you're telling me just happened by a mutation, by a mistake in a genetic code in the DNA. And it's like, dudes, I'm not seeing it. You can explain it to me, like I said, with you know, and then the layers besides, you know, and I'll conclude with this because I love to talk about it. But yeah, you go out as far as you can see, design that is implemented, no matter what that implementation is, but it's fine-tuned to get us to be able to see it. Then we have, again, recap the galaxies, or the galaxy, and we have Jupiter, help me out, the big old planet out there that's sucking in its gravity, getting a lot of space debris that
Saturn.
Saturn.
Wait, do you mean in the galaxy, the scale of the galaxy, or the scale of the solar system?
So thank you. You helped me out before on that. Thank you. Solar system. That is I would say, well, we say it's design. It's a design, whether by chance or by creator, that's taken a lot of the debris. One big hit, and we know we're done. This planet is going to be gone with a big hit. And so then you go into our moon with that. You got the all the gravity and everything in design that, but it's layer upon layer upon layer. And then Dawkins with his perspective or his thought that, well, God would be more a complex thought, that the simplest explanation for the causes we see is the natural processes. And so that's why I'm saying the evidence I've given we'll all agree it appears designed. I would say it was designed because of the layer upon layer. And then, so we got our Earth, we got our planet, we got the chemicals, we have then life form, symbiotic relationships, systems. And so it has to be a total picture of what we're seeing was designed, but that to say that came in without a designer, your odds are astronomical. And then, of course, you're talking about the cause of time, space, matter, and energy could not have been time, space, matter, and energy. So it's actually an easier jump to say that there's something out there that did the creating, that did the designing, the engineering. And so that is my thoughts and my thing on it. Hey, Aiden, how you doing?
Rah, 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 I'm here to disrupt. This is a perfectly good stream. I'm going to make it a horrible disaster. Rah. I mean, hey, how's it going, everybody?
All right. This is your one and only warning. I am so angry at you right now.
I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I invited. Now we're arguing about who can throw who out.
You know what, Steven? You know what I think about you? Insert mean thing here. That's what I think about you, Steven.
All right.
Okay, did you say there was somewhere with questions? I don't know.
We do have questions. You want to answer those, Dan?
No, I just want to hear them. I just want to chat now. No,
okay. Well, look.
Dan, you're in California, right? Sorry.
What's that?
Do you want to answer the questions, Dan? No, I just want to hear them.
You in California, Dan?
I am in California.
Okay, I thought so. Okay.
Answering questions is
all right.
So I'll go for another 3 hours. I'm fine.
Everyone in the comment section.
Guys, I will keep you guys up past midnight sometimes. Like, sorry, but then I did get a call at like 4 something today that woke me up. But
excuse me, Dan. Steven was trying to get a word in edgewise. Dan, excuse me.
No. It's Dan's show.
I know.
We have 3 questions marked for you, Dan. All 3 are from Creationist Crybaby. And to everyone out in the comment section, if you have questions for Dan and you don't want to come onto the panel, go ahead and start posting them, and I will try to star them, and other hosts can star them. But our first question for you, Dan the Man, is while evolution relies upon detailed, well-defined processes.
I'm out. Wait, time out. I'm out in space. So I'm still thinking of what you were saying before. Can you start over?
Yes.
You must be on Saturn right
now. Dan the Man with the plan. While evolution relies upon detailed, well-defined processes such as mutation and natural selection, why does ID offer no descriptions of the design process or the designer?
Very good question, and that's actually something I'm you'll see me out here a lot on things, and so go back to his statement of well-defined.
What is ID?
No, his question.
I think it's an acronym for intelligent design.
Yeah.
Intelligent design. Yes, thank you. Thanks, David.
So can you read that part again? Because I can't see it. and I'm not even going to try to read right now. But so
I
what
will be
was-
here all week, brother.
you can actually just read that again then. But it was a part about that there's well-defined mechanisms.
Well, the question is, while evolution relies upon detailed, well-defined processes such as mutation and natural selection,
Good.
why
You just-
does
no, that's good. So I'm gonna throw the flag on that one. Little football referee talk there, or I guess soccer would do that too. That well-defined is great, but show me. I can't design something off of definitions or philosophy. And so, like I said, I've had people, and I don't care. I like information. I like to learn things. So when you tell me that there's I'll read that again. Sorry, so I get the quote right. Well-defined
processes such as mutation and natural selection.
Right. So then it show me. And like I said, I've had that out for years.
Okay.
Of give me that peer reviewed list of, because these mutations have to add information, and I'll give you that my dog is
Wait, what do you mean by add information though? Hold on. What do you mean by add information? Because when I hear that, I know of two very differing versions of that from creationists. Some creationists, when they say add information, they mean extra information, extra chromosomal data being added where none had existed there before, and some mean that data simply changing from what it had initially been. So what do you mean when you say add?
I'll give them either, because then too, it has to be the big picture. And back at that simple life, I think we all agree that you didn't have billions of characters to the first for the first simple life. We could not have the simple life we define as today being original first life. It's a term, and sorry,
well, evolution doesn't have anything to say about abiogenesis either.
No. But once life started, so we have all these little simple life forms. They, by definition, had to be less complex. If they happened by chemical synthesis, they'd have to be less amounts. And if we define like DNA having information, whatever you want to define that's how I define information, is that it's like a book. You can read it, they can take it, and they say, oh, there's probably some disease there, or this is what makes your hands. Eventually they'll have it all mapped out. So when after abiogenesis, the simple life forms, and there would have had to have been trillions of them, and sure, they'd have been small, and we can say they didn't fossilize, but then so to get from those ones that had to have less genetic stuff thrown into them to the simple cells we need today, that is adding information. Because now science, and I think you'll agree that science has said that, well, we can take certain parts out and still have life. But there's still, even in the evolution, God without God, and probably with God evolution, are saying that you can only get it down to maybe a few hundred to be the first life. And that is that's complex when we know. Go ahead.
Well, cyanobacteria are some of the earliest evidenced bacteria that we have in the fossil record. We have giant fossilized beds of cyanobacteria that are dated to, I believe, between 3 and 3.5 billion years old, is where we typically find dating for these cyanobacterial beds. And those have about 3,300 genes in them, which I will admit is indeed less than a human genome. It's 3,300 compared to 20 to 25,000 in a human genome. So you're right in that there are more genomes present, but besides that being a numerically larger number, I really don't see why it necessarily has to be more complex in any way besides us just arbitrarily declaring it to be more complex. Like the strawberry has more genes than a human genome has. We've mapped more genes for the strawberry plant than we have for a human being. And I would think that most people would say that we exhibit more complex behavior than a strawberry.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I think number of genes and things like that don't necessarily indicate complexity. I think that there are a profound number of animals out there that exhibit incredibly complex behavior far beyond what any human group of people would be capable of contributing. You know, like there are some incredibly unique behavioral characteristics of animals that in a human perspective would be incredibly complex. But I think that's the issue of this discussion, is when we're talking about complexity, we're talking about an arbitrarily human thing that we're trying to assign to things that I would say ultimately are equally complex in that they are alive. They're a living being, they reproduce, they have all of the processes on the base level that we do. I think that all life could be argued to be equally complex depending on what perspective you're looking at it from.
Yeah, no, and I would. I'd argue that is highly complex. So, but my thought is, so, and help me out with the scientific method that we figure out what is today, and then take that back in time. Uniformitarianism, is that what it is? Help me out here, guys. But so, yeah, you look at the genes now, but the theory of evolution is that, and not maybe complex is the wrong word, because yeah, I see complexity in everything, but just the building of a initial first life or first life forms had to have less parts, because we know what is, even in your little bacteria guy you were talking about, to have that many genes, you would have to say then, well, yeah, there had to be something before that with less genes, because that thing didn't pop it. That wasn't the first life. And so evolution kind of demands that as you go back farther, that and not complex, but less parts, maybe as a designer, I should say less parts to it.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I just want to clarify with Andrew. Yes, I am I guess the term that creationists would use is I am an atheistic evolutionist.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that based on your language things.
Yeah, but you can contribute to the conversation. You've been waiting very patiently. So
oh yeah, I didn't want to interrupt or anything. So, but I appreciate that. Yeah,
my show. Interrupt right now.
Do you have a question, Andrew? You can go ahead and shoot it out there.
Oh well, I guess one thing that was coming to mind with the topic being discussed right now was the process / mechanism of gene duplication that's been observed in some organisms alive today. So that could be one potential way of increasing the genomic size of different organisms, among other things. Like sometimes you can even have the entire genome of an organism accidentally duplicated, and the individual genes can be changed from there. So there are a lot of mechanisms to explain different genome size, I think.
No, that is true. But then too, the duplication, and we're thinking of it today as a designer, you got to get your head back to, so we're talking 3 billion, and I won't argue time. It doesn't matter if it's
Sure.
the same problem, whether it's 6,000 years or 3 billion years, it's the same evidence we have to go through. And so, but that first life could not have had, actually help me out, Aiden, or you could, because I know you're knowledgeable. I've seen you before, but hundreds or thousands of genes with up in the billions of individual DNA. Even and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was pretty well, and this is where I could be corrected on a lot of stuff, that the abiogenesis, who have to put together that first life form, they're not trying to put together one of the modern bacterias.
Right.
I think Dr. Torres is not confused, but it because even he's like most of us, we're thinking in the present to explain the past, but the past, by definition of godless, and that's not a bad term, my words, but creation without a God, you go back to that first life, and it can't be complexed. I mean, okay, it can't have a lot of parts, because we know the chemicals that are needed in these parts. And then, you know, and you're right, and I agree that, say, like a dog, there's some changes in there. Now, whether those were mutations or they were already part of that billion thing program inside them, we can debate and not know. But, you know, there has to be an addition of parts.
So, Dan.
Yeah.
I think I have a good illustrative example for you of what's being discussed here. So I will agree with you in that there has been no scientific experiment in a laboratory setting that has created life out of non-living, non-organic matter. I agree there. However, we've gotten as close at this point in time as replicating the building block that life uses to assemble itself in a laboratory setting with things like the Miller-Urey experiment. Would you agree with that? We've been able to establish base RNA compounds and protein chains that are what life uses to build itself off of. Would you agree with that?
To a point, not the Miller-Urey, because that experiment showed that those chemicals that were created, the amino acids that were created, had to have been separated out of there mechanically, so that they didn't keep going to junk. And so
right. But I was going to follow that up with something as well. So I was just asking if you agree with the premise of what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's experience. I just had a point with that, because I've heard there's experiments even today that they are building some of those building blocks. So
it's not Miller-Urey.
Yeah.
So prior to the 1930s, we did not know how to build skyscrapers. We had the materials to build the skyscraper. You know, we had the iron and the steel and all of that in order to assemble a skyscraper, but we didn't know the right technique on how to lay girders and supports and foundations in such a way that a skyscraper could be constructed.
Okay,
I think that we have a hold on before I'm done. I'm done. Wait. I'm so close.
No, I know. Oh, I'll make the joke afterwards. Go ahead. Yes, skyscrapers are okay. The skyscrapers are a piece of junk. Go ahead.
No, the point that I'm making is that we've got the steel, we've got the concrete, we've got all the materials, but we haven't figured out yet how to lay them in such a combination that they would be able to support and keep a skyscraper standing. So to me, and I'm not saying that you've said this, but I've heard this said by a lot of creationists. You know, I've heard them say, well, yeah, we've been able to get the materials through experimentation, but we'll never be able to actually make life. To me, that comes across just as ignorant as somebody in 1929 going, well, yeah, you know, you've been able to make concrete and you've been able to make steel and iron and all that, but you'll never be able to get it to be a skyscraper. Come on now.
Yeah, but Aiden, if I may, even if they were able to do that in a lab, which from my knowledge and from my study, the leaders in the field say it's almost impossible and they doubt it'll ever be probable. But even if we were able to do that, we would still just be assembling components that already exist. We still couldn't claim that we made anything. We assembled things that already existed.
Well, that's what would happen in nature too, though, Stephen. Components would be assembled.
Right, but that's the whole. But that's the whole point of the show tonight, is that there's a designer.
Right, but there doesn't have to. That's the entire point of it being replicated in a laboratory setting. Is that there are scenarios where it can be done.
Go ahead. If I may just throw something in, but if we do manage to prove it in a lab, and I agree with you, we might be very close. Doesn't that prove that it takes a creator to create life?
No, I don't think that it. I don't think that it proves that it takes that. I think it proves that it is possible that life can arise through processes that we can observe. I don't think that proves that it takes a creator.
Essentially, the chemicals are assembling by chemical principles, not. No one's
right.
It's not putting.
Yeah, no, there's not somebody with like a screwdriver putting the chemical proteins together in just such a way that they're able to get it to be
Yeah, but
alive.
we are having to add mixtures. So a designer is still adding the components. He may not be actually tweaking it everywhere, but it took a person to make it happen in a lab that is controlled. I mean, how can that equate to creating itself? It doesn't prove that whatsoever.
Oh, no.
It proves there's a designer.
No, the reason why we bring it up is because if it does occur in a laboratory setting, it shows that it can occur elsewhere, anywhere in the universe.
That's a great point. And so I just I like the analogy of material things for biology because it's actually a good design thing. And it gets shot down so many times by evolutionists like, well, you're talking about physical things. No, the principles of design are the principles of design. The problem is when you have these laws and like skyscraper or whatever, we're not going to get up to the moon because with a skyscraper because there's laws of the universe that do not allow that. So right now, though, it seems like we know the laws of chemistry and we know the little parts, and to say like that, like concrete, it takes the I should know this as a contractor. I don't care. It takes the lye and whatever and sand and gravel and water, but you can't add that water till you're ready to do it. So the laws of the nature is that if you mix the concrete, and we've had a couple jobs that they were bad to us. They mixed the concrete early or got us a batch because they started pouring and it started setting. Luckily, I didn't do the concrete, so I had my concrete guys, a subcontractor that was not happy with me, but it wasn't my fault. So then when we look at the chemicals and we have laws of chemicals that go together, say like the Miller-Urey experiment is actually a good example. So yeah, you have these chemicals, they mix together, for some things, they're going to create building blocks of life. But right now, the laws of nature say they're not going to stay that amino acid unless they're separated from everything else.
So if I prove gravitation in a laboratory setting, if I prove the theory of gravitation, or if I demonstrate it to be consistent beyond reasonable doubt in a laboratory setting, does that mean that there has to be somebody, holding up that thing that I'm dropping in the lab in order for something to drop anywhere else in the universe? I'm sure that there's a boulder. I'm sure there's a boulder tumbling off a cliff. No, it's not. And let me finish explaining.
It's not the same. It's way more complicated than leaving the mic drop to the floor. It's way more complicated.
By what metric is it more complicated, Achilles?
By hundreds of thousands of metrics, my man. Are you kidding me? Every time this is brought up, gravity is being brought up as we know it's happening. Well, if you look into that, there are issues with gravity. We take it for granted and we gave it a type, but there could be something else.
But it's a good example,
right? But the theory of gravity
gravity is a law. So I know if I drop something, I'm going to fall. That's the law. Now, if I drop something and it just stays in motion or goes up, there's some other factor. There's a magician, because that law of gravity we know is going to work unless some other force, some wind underneath it. So we
exactly do know, that's a beautiful example. Something acting outside of nature, being supernatural. Yes, I agree.
Well, it could be just a wind tunnel coming up, or
right. But if we exclude all naturalistic explanations for why that thing is going up, we could only conclude at that point that it is as the result of a supernatural process. But we can only conclude that it is a supernatural process with reason when we have ruled out every naturalistic means of explaining it. That's the only time that you can go, well, it must be supernatural. If there's no naturalistic explanation for it whatsoever, then fine. That's the only possible explanation.
But an explanation, you'd have to have that evidence. You'd have to see something floating that is going against the law of nature. But the law of chemistry, Miller-Urey, is that things do not... There's the chemical laws that things can attract different things together. But there's no law to keep them there. The law is that they will keep.
That's not true. That's not true. We haven't found it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like that's a very faulty bit of reasoning right there.
Well,
Just because we haven't come across a means.
Wait
of
a minute.
keeping
Hold
those
on. Hold on.
chemicals together.
Aiden, are you conceding that there could be a God?
No, no.
We haven't found him yet, but
I've never not said that God is a possibility. I've always said that God is a possibility. I've never said that it's impossible for the God of the Bible to exist.
Now, so
you're blowing my mind.
My thing on that, no, and that's most atheists, unless they've really got a problem with. I mean,
I was paying Aiden an actual compliment.
No, I know, but usually
I told you he was smarter than the others.
Come on now, behave yourself, Achilles.
I know. I'm gonna. Where's my wrench? You guys stop it up there.
I'm done, Dan. I'm sorry.
I know, because they're smarter than me, so you're cutting me down too. So I'm gonna wrench you, dude. So they're gonna regret they gave me that wrench sooner or later once I figured out how to use it. But yeah, so
Aiden, it's actually me. No, I'm just kidding.
But you look at that and you say, so you have to exhaust every other thing, which is actually admitting that there isn't really there's explanations, but there is no the scientific consensus is not done on an overwhelming amount of evidence. And I'll go farther than that. It's like, so we know that the Miller-Urey experiment showed opposite of what we need for abiogenesis. And
That's
so
not true.
Well, how do you separate? See, now you're saying there might be a mechanism.
There's a mechanical means of separating those things apart. There's absolutely plenty of those. Tidal forces is one of those things that could have easily done that. Tidal forces could have provided it. Variables such as a massive change in temperature, like a strike of lightning, could have changed that. There are natural means that things can be mechanically mixed together. An earthquake, a hurricane.
Well, no, not mixed together, mixed apart, because
mixed together or mixed apart. Honestly, I mean, like you can observe either one of those processes in nature.
Let's let Dan finish his thought before we try to counter it. Take your time to counter it for sure, but let's let him finish his thought.
Anyways, what I was trying to no, I'm sorry, Stephen. Go ahead.
No, so but as a designer, you're telling me that the laws that I have to go under to create something, I've got to exhaust all one before I say that's not working. But I'm saying, so go back to the title things, you have a mixture of amino acids floating around because of the electricity, because of whatever else they put in there, whatever atmosphere they thought was there. So you've got that all mixed together, though, with stuff that is going to cause the amino acids to disintegrate into junk for life. So you're telling me that more lightning into that pond will separate just the amino acids that we need and take away all there was like some toxic stuff in that mix with Miller-Urey. You don't want to be snorting.
Well, of course not. I mean, the conditions in the Miller-Urey experiment replicate an Earth that doesn't exist anymore. It replicates an anoxic Earth that doesn't have any oxygen in its atmosphere. And quite obviously, that's not the case anymore. We have something about 22% oxygen content in our atmosphere right now. And the conditions for the Miller-Urey experiment were entirely anoxic. So why don't we see it anymore in modern, in the modern Earth? Because the conditions for that to have happened ceased to exist billions of years ago. But
if
that's
I may also add that I don't, as far as I'm aware, modern origin of life researchers, the hypotheses that they're suggesting currently don't revolve around amino acids producing the rest of the molecules like nucleotides or carbohydrates. It's as far as I'm aware, it's usually a peptide RNA-based condition originally. So there would have been some amino acids floating around, some pre-nucleotide chemicals floating around, and then those would have built more complex things from there.
So and just real quick, Dan, what you were talking about in terms of exhausting every other possibility, the reason why I say that is because the possibility that you are positing to be the thing that happened is a supernatural explanation. It's an explanation that goes outside of everything that we understand about nature, about reality. And it says, no, that's not what did it. It's something outside of all of those things that did that.
Right.
Well, why not examine everything that's within that bubble of reality and figure everything out that we can within that before we just immediately jump to the conclusion of, oh, well, it must be something outside of that. Because when you do that,
brother. I'll tell you why. Can I have this response? Because
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm coming back to my monitor, and I will look here to see that there are 244 comments that I haven't checked, because I am on the other side of the room and I'm building a computer. It has taken me a couple of weeks to find the right parts, couple of days to put it together. Now I'm doing the cable management. I've solved a lot of issues. And if once you get into Windows and you try to find within the operating system where I am, you're not going to find me. I'm all outside of it. I'm the one building it, and I'm outside that computer. You cannot find me in the ones and the zeros.
right?
You see
But
why
the means
there is
by
this
those
alternative? That's
the
why
means
we are
by-
searching for the creator outside the creation.
Right, but you haven't exhausted all the means of checking that. In your example, you said that you can't find them anywhere within the code. Well, we haven't looked through all the code yet, Achilles. We just haven't.
Well,
As a matter of fact, hold on, no, wait.
Hey,
I'm not done with my. I'm not done with that.
One point at a time, Aiden. I'll respond to what you just said. No matter how much you spend time trying to find me in there, you will not.
How do you know
I'm
that?
not in there. I'm
How
outside
could you
of
say
it.
that? How could you say that? Because you haven't
I'm not
looked through
there.
all the
I'm
code.
outside. I'm
You
building
can't
it.
say that honestly, though, because you haven't looked through all the code, Achilles. You can't make that statement with certainty without having looked through all the code. You just can't.
Aiden, are you serious now?
Well, no, I don't know.
If you look at all the
Back
code in
reports.
that computer, you're gonna find me in there who is building it and putting the cables together.
I'm saying that the only way that you could find out for sure whether it is or is not you is to look through all of that code. That is the only way that you can honestly derive a conclusion on those things. Anything beyond anything short of that is just guesswork.
Well, is it far-fetched to not go all the way to the end of the code before you realize, wait a minute, maybe it's not in the code?
No, not if you are genuinely trying to assess the entirety of reality as in as accurate a way as possible, then you will look through all of that code before you come to that conclusion. And that is why science doesn't come to any sort of definitive conclusion about reality, because we don't have access to all of the data.
Well, so
I think it's silly to, with the tiny fraction of a percent of the data that we have right now, to go, oh, well, we just need to throw our hands up in the air and say, well, it just must be something outside of this data. Well, how can you know that?
Well, we're not throwing the hands in the air. We're just, as Dan is presenting today, we are seeing that it's not possible for this whole thing to not be created.
Yes, let me answer that real quick. Is that and I mean, you can go look for more questions. Thanks, Kelly. So what you're saying though, but we have exhausted the laws that we know of that regulate chemicals. We have had
we haven't though, because the field of experimentation is still open for that. We haven't exhausted. I disagree with that.
And so what? So we do know chemicals, and like I said, I think they're shooting for too complex of little organism as the first life, and that's why they haven't defined it, because every time they look further into it, it's like, no, it's got to be something simpler than this, because this is an impossibility to do. So we got to find some simple life form that could have could have chemically synthesized to make a life form. So and so we don't even know if the reproduction that they're shooting for, and I will tell you on
phrase there, we don't know.
Yeah, and so but as a designer, everything we know, and that's part of the design issue, is that everything we know about design. So the cause of everything that we know, your skyscrapers, the synthesis of chemicals, say like Dr. Torr's using those simple things, everything outside of our question about complexity of the life forms, or even simple ones. So outside that, everything else in our experience that is complex, and especially an overwhelming amount. We're just talking again about abiogenesis, but that's just a little teeny part of it. When you throw in everything, like I said, that had to be there, you have, like Dr. Dawkins said, the improbability, the statistics against fine tuning. That was and you can look, not Dr. Hitchens, who said his biggest problem he and Dawkins were talking was the fine tuning of the universe. So you can't just, as we say, we exhaust everything. The evidence of the layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of complexity points to a designer creator in our experience. Now we can take that aside and go, well, nature's going to be different, but then we look into nature. And like I said, as a designer, I'm even looking past like the Dr. Torr's, no, I don't think, everybody thinks it can't be a modern bacteria or something, whatever. The simplest thing we have today can't be the first life, because the chemicals, we know the laws that attract stuff.
Yes, you're reiterating what you were saying earlier.
Right. And so, but I think that has to be reiterated, because when we debate one little thing, no, but you also, it's the mass, as we're talking to abiogenesis, and that's the only one that is like, well, we haven't exhausted.
No, it's not. It's not the only one that we have. And I disagree with that contention. We, as of right now, in our current understanding of science, the way that we advance our idea of scientific understanding using the scientific method is a means that we have only had access to for a couple of centuries at this point. And within those couple of centuries, the preponderance of information that we have come across and assembled and put together is absolutely immense. It's the definition of Titanic. So for us as a species, in the midst of that process, in the midst of gathering all of that information and all of that data and trying to make sense of it and trying to put those pieces together and explaining the reality with which we live in, have come to a few conclusions about that reality and how we have observed it. And one of those things that we've come to the conclusion of is that the best explanation that we currently have access to for why life on this earth has diversified and proliferated in the way that it does is Darwinian evolution. And the confluence of evidence for Darwinian evolution is some of the largest in the history of the field of science. Simply the largest. And you guys reject the confluence of all of that evidence. So I can't help but be a little bit apprehensive of the notion that evidence is the biggest thing that's holding you guys back.
Yeah, but to be fair, Aiden, that's because your guys' evidence consists of manipulating through a person, a designer, in a controlled lab with components that already exist, and then you tell us that it happens naturally on its own.
No, we said
that's absurd. And this is
that's
the type of evidence that you guys present to us.
That's not
let me
still. That's a completely different thing, Stephen. Those are not
clarify.
Those are apples and oranges.
Well, let's clarify, because again, we have to take the whole, we're not just talking about design and biology, but even taking that.
No, but we were talking about evolution, and then it immediately got shifted over to abiogenesis, and I don't think that was very fair in the context of the conversation that we were having.
No, and that's why I said the first life, and I always kept it to first life, and then I might have slipped in to some, I think it was Andrew. Forgive me if I'm the one that brought up abiogenesis when I'm still in my mind the whole package. But so even from that simple life, first life, it is and would have to be and defined as complex. I agree with you. There's nothing simple. Now, my point was, and when I got back to that, but that just because of the laws we know of chemistry, that first life could not have been a modern bacteria with thousands of genetic things. I think we can all agree on that. So the first life had to have less parts.
It had to have had a specific number, though, right? Like it had to have had a number where it was able to proliferate versus when it was not able to proliferate.
Correct. It had to have the cell wall that lets stuff in, lets stuff out. It had to have, I would think, a power source to keep it.
I don't think the first life had nucleus. I think the nucleus was actually a later development of what's the phrase? Andrew, you know it, I'm sure. It's
Eukaryote?
Non-eukaryotic versus eukaryotic life. Thank you.
Prokaryote versus eukaryotes, yeah.
Well, I thank you because I didn't even bring that up because I get them backwards. So, man, I feel smarter that you had to get help on that, Aiden.
There's plenty of times where I know the term, I know the context in which it needs to be used, but the actual word itself I cannot find to save my life.
I know.
Happens plenty.
Thank God we're all on that same page.
I'm 10 times worse, so it's like a victory for me. No, I'm over that.
You got me, dude. You got me. You defeated me. You know what? I'll just say it right now. I
Didn't
lost.
know a word. He didn't know a word.
No, only those of us that are dyslexic and really have a problem can pick on Aiden for being highly intelligent, and I would slap him because I'm jealous. But no, go ahead.
Andrew, you're gonna say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just want to ask this because I stepped away for a little bit. What's the point of contention now exactly? Sorry for missing all that.
The point of contention. Yes, the point of contention that I was making is essentially that the theory of evolution is the scientific theory with one of the largest bodies of evidence in all of science. And my contention is that they're making the claim that we don't find evidence of naturalistic creation. We need evidence for naturalistic creation. And my contention was that I am apprehensive of that notion when they reject such a large confluence of evidence when it comes to evolution.
I think for this discussion, we also need to be clear about what point we're addressing specifically, because on the one hand, you can be talking about natural creation, quote unquote, of life in general, or the first life as we've been talking about so far, or you can be talking about the creation of anatomy more generally for specific organisms. So I sometimes hear different arguments for both from creationists in different discussions. So I think we need to be clear on our terms here.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think when they're saying creation, I think they mean and I'm not saying this term to be insulting, this is what it is, the magical process of things just popping into existence because they were willed into existence by a creator.
And then, so I want to back up and hold that point so I don't forget, but your statement that we disallow all the evidence, it's actually mainly just the first life being stepping stones on a upward progression to all the complexity. And then mine, Andrew, is an argument that you can't take just the argument on design and creation on like just the one part. That's why I bring the whole thing, all of the galaxy, the fine tuning. Even Dawkins was saying that's improbable. But then you go in and farther in down to, and now we've got and darn, I couldn't remember it the other day too. The physics, the basic physics now that's even smaller, zap in and out of
Quantum.
Thank you. You're the one. So the argument for design is that, one thing we can pick apart and say, yeah, I can, and because as humans, we can experiment, as a horticulturalist, I haven't done it, but we had a guy named Luther Burbank here, 19th century. He developed a bunch of plants just naturally without stuff. And so we know that we can get things to change. So, but then you do the whole thing from the great expansion to quantum physics, and the farther science digs in, the more expanse. And so, but my main one was that I would say 90% of science, I agree with. We have different dogs.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the closest star system to ours?
Probably tons of times, but you can help me out because
Achilles, I'm going to give it to you. What's the closest star system to us?
Andromeda.
Andromeda, right?
That's a galaxy. That's the closest galaxy to us. The closest star system to us is Proxima Centauri. So, Proxima and Alpha Centauri. So the Alpha Centauri.
Wait. That's the center. That's the center of the galaxy. I didn't hear what you said. You said Alpha Centauri.
No, the center of the galaxy is Sagittarius A. Alpha and Proxima Centauri are it's the closest star system to us. It's about 4 light years away. Anyways, complexity is what you're talking about, Dan. Proxima B is a suspected habitable world that orbits around the Proxima Centauri system. And it's not a binary star system as most people think of it. It's actually a trinary star system. So there's Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. Those are the two primary stars. And Proxima Centauri orbits those two, whereas A and B orbit each other within resonance. So that system of orbits between all three of those stars is an incredibly complex system. It's incredibly complicated. There's an incredible amount of physics that go into making that work and allowing Proxima B to be in the area where it is, in this habitable area of its star system.
It proves the creator.
No, that's actually that it actually is the antithesis of that, because why aren't we, if we are the result of creation, and if creation is evidenced by incredible complexity, then why aren't we in the Alpha Centauri system where everything is so much more complicated and everything is just so much more complex? Why don't we have a K-type star that we orbit around that is more complex in terms of its nuclear fissile reactions, and on top of that has the benefit of not emitting a whole bunch of UV radiation that gives us skin cancer? There's a variety of different circumstances in the universe that are quote unquote more complex that we have never physically witnessed with our own eyes. So I don't see how we're special in a cosmic sense.
And I would agree with you is that God's the special. And so coming from a designer, like I said, I don't know if you were listening when I did a futuristic garden and I planted I put this little plastic candy jar head out of sight that nobody saw. So a lot of my design, and then if you look under a water feature, there's more complexity under the water feature that nobody sees. So as a designer, I would expect where, somebody that could have designed and created all the complexity, we say, wouldn't just focus on this planet, because we have plenty here to see beauty, majesty, all this complexity. It's kind of like a painter. Actually, here's one because, and it's not a happy one, but so if you saw some of the murals on those Hall of Flowers shows, kids shows, family shows, really detailed. And if you know the designer, not the designer, but the painters, the actual people doing it, they'll point out, oh, look at that right there. Nobody's going to see that, but that's, something that a young child shouldn't be looking at. And so we have evidence of complexity out of sight, even by designers. So to say that God wouldn't have done that is saying he's more limited than I would. But that would be my answer to that, is that you would be surprised some of the stuff, if I've had time, that I've designed behind the stages that none of the public sees. It's
I just when I hear the notion that, oh, well, things are complex, therefore they have to be designed, that rings as nothing short of incredibly arbitrary to me, because whenever I ask those people, okay, well, at what level of simplicity does something have to be for it to no longer be indicative of design? I never get an answer in response to that, because...
Okay, I dealt with that, but thanks for the answer, because it probably didn't come out. So we have design. We can all say that the patterns in the sand. It's a beautiful design. It's random. But in my garden or in any kind of design, you don't judge that it wasn't a design as a total package because of the simple stuff. It's not how simple can something get, it's the package of complexity.
Right, but that's what I'm saying to you. At what level do you have to reduce the complexity of a system or an object or anything for that matter? At what level does the complexity of that have to be reduced or have to be at in order for you to go, oh, well, that's obviously not indicative of design? Because if everything is inherently indicative of design, no matter how complex or not complex it is, then it's an entirely useless yardstick of measuring reality.
And see, I think we're using the wrong measuring stick, period.
I'll give the example. So in our art gallery, my friend has this awesome painter. And so some of the stuff isn't finished. To me, it's gorgeous. But if I look at it and I just looked at the part that's not finished or the simple, because some of his paintings he has to throw out. So even completed ones. Some of it is very simple. He just puts color because he's trying to make a living, but does these great water scenes, the dolphins and whales coming out, total cool stuff. And when we get it online, you guys will have to look because it's just awesome. It makes any of those artists that do the underwater stuff, he's like on steroids. But when I judge his painting, I'm not going to judge it for the simple stuff. The gauge of something that's complex is the part that's complex. So on the seashore, it's like it is a design, and that's what my my thesis was, that it is a design. It is a simple design that could be done by, and it is done by, pretty simple natural laws. And I made the thing of the snowflake, same thing. You do the right conditions, boom, it's going to do the ice crystals. But you don't judge a painting. One of my gardens, some of my gardens, now that's kind of the opposite. When I haven't finished one, I'm knocked down because of the part that didn't get finished. That's simple, because it's finished.
You realize that doesn't answer my question at all, though, right, Dan?
No, so clarify, because you're saying that how simple does something have to get? Yes, sand on the seashore, that I could go with because I could do that. I can go out there, splash water. But you're trying to judge.
Yeah, that's what I'm at. Where is that? Where is the line? Where is this line in the sand that you are apparently saying exists by the nature of your argument? Where does this exist where something is not complex enough to be created on this side of the line, but is complex enough to be created on the other side? Of where is that line?
Okay, very good. So I'll kind of go to a smaller side. So with the galaxy, and we say the Goldilocks zone, Richard Dawkins, it's like improbable. It's really highly unlikely that happened by just natural processes. So, but you would argue and he would, is like, well, it's here, so it had to have happened. It was improbable, and he has the book, Climbing Mount Improbable, because it was improbable for the universe to come.
Well, improbabilistic compared to what, though? Like, when we're talking about improbable, we're talking about 1 in what? 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in a billion, 1 in a trillion.
Size of 1 for the universe.
1 in 10 trillion. Even if you had a sample of 10 trillion and only 1 occurred, then you would still have dozens of examples of that within the universe. You would still have dozens of examples of that within the universe. Just because it is a rarity and it is incredibly uncommon doesn't mean that it takes a designer to do that, because we have tens of billions of stars in this galaxy alone. So it's not just us that are in the habitable zone. There are plenty of other stars around the galaxy right now that are, and I'm sure you meant the solar system, but there is a habitable zone around the galaxy as well, because closer to the core of the galaxy, the radiation levels for stars being so much closer together is sufficient that you can't have life. And far away enough from the galactic core, you don't have enough heavy and complex elements sufficient to be able to build a complex society like we've built today. So there is indeed a Goldilocks zone within our galaxy where you can have a perfect amount of those two things. But there's billions of stars that occupy that Goldilocks zone. So
Okay,
I think that what you're talking about needs to be put into perspective of just how gargantuan of a universe we live within.
No, exactly. And so, but as a designer creator, I'm in my mind is how do I do that? So to get that Goldilocks zone, what do I have to do? The great expansion has to be, and this is outside my realm. I'm just trusting both evolutionists and people like Dawkins that have seen the stats, the mathematicians that says like 10 to the hundreds of zeros, that could have, that if it was a little bit off, we wouldn't get the Goldilocks. So it's the expansion.
If I may jump in here, usually statistics is based on larger sample sizes, though, so it's much harder to do it for a small sample size. In this case, one for the universe we live in. So that's kind of one big issue I have with a lot of these fine-tuning arguments is how can you even say it's improbable based on perhaps some certain a priori assumptions of what you think is probable, but that's typically not what we mean when we talk about probabilities or statistics.
Yeah, but when we look around all the other planets that surround us and are, which, by the way, much older than us, which goes into the Fermi's paradox, it is improbable because none of the other planets exhibit the form of evolution you guys described taking place on this planet.
But Stephen, the amount of actual areas that humans have had any sort of contact with, even just radio contact with, is absolutely minuscule.
I know, but Aiden, that's kind of always your guys' argument. Either we can't observe enough space or we can't go back enough time. Like it's always something that's unreachable.
If you're looking for elephants in Africa, and you land your ship on the shore of Africa, and you take a couple of steps around the ship, and you look around just the direct area where you landed, and maybe, you walk around the shore a little bit, but you go back to your ship, and you go, there must be no elephants in Africa. I looked around the shore. There wasn't any. Is that a reasonable statement?
It is for science because we actually have to observe it. But here, and back to
no, it's not, because the point that I'm making is that the actual area that you're observing is minuscule.
Right, but Aiden, the burden of proof is on you. You want to convince me that there are elephants there, but you can't demonstrate it for me. You can't test it for me. It's not repeatable. So, how can you say we know definitively that there are elephants elsewhere? But we can.
Yes, we can.
But you just told me we've only observed a small, minute amount of space, right?
Right.
So how can we test it? If we can't test it, how can we test it?
We're
Aiden?
observing more every day. You realize that, right?
Steve? Yeah, but we've still observed nothing. Like you're just proving my point. The more we observe, the more nothing we find.
Stephen,
yeah, but until we do, you can't say that that's science.
We've been doing complex astronomy, like what you're talking about, for less than a century. Like the amount of time that we have been actually doing complex radio astronomy, let alone things like what the James Webb or Hubble Space Telescopes are doing.
Which has still found nothing, by the way.
Right, I agree.
Billions of dollars and found nothing, by the way.
Well, hold on, wait. Are you talking about that they were created to find life? Because that's not true. They were created.
No, but I'm just saying, since it is out there floating around, you would think by now you guys would find something where evolution exists.
Why do you think that? Why?
Because that's your hypothesis. Our hypothesis is everything out there is a crappy rock except for us because we're a special designed rock.
So we need to
Webb wasn't built to do that, though.
But no, hold on. Wait, This is the contention that Stephen's
Hold on. Let Dan in. It is his show.
What did Andrew try to comment? What was that?
Oh, I was just saying the James Webb and Hubble were designed for that purpose specifically, but I think
they weren't designed specifically to find life. No, you're right. That was one of the things that the James Webb is capable of doing in terms of exoplanet atmospheric observations, which it's currently doing right now. It's currently executing science and observing exoplanet atmospheres right now. But Stephen, your contention is basically, we have said that it is likely that other life exists. Therefore, within the minuscule amount of time that we've been studying things, we would have had to have found it. That's absurd. That's absurd.
I'm saying that we should at least be able to observe the crumbs of life out there, and we haven't even done that. We haven't even found space trash, Aiden.
Why would we?
Because it's your hypothesis. How is it a fair statement to say there's most likely life out there, but everything we observe shows no life out there?
Yeah, because it's an absolutely massive universe, Stephen.
but
It's an
to-
absolutely
to-
gargantuan universe.
to
And as
agree
I
with,
just
wait a
stated
minute,
with
Tom.
Dan,
It's
hold on,
a giant, giant universe of
I just
billions of
stated-
years old, and
I
there's still no
just
evidence
stated-
observable.
wait,
I just stated earlier,
Raven,
though, that even if something was 1 in a trillion odds of happening, that you would still find dozens of examples of it throughout our universe. Do you know
I don't
why,
need dozens
Stephen?
of examples. I just want you guys to present me with a freaking answer.
No, and
Just
so
give me
what-
one.
Stephen,
Give me
and
a
Stephen,
Where's my
answer.
mute
You
button?
cited the
Where is
further.
my wrench?
All right, Dan.
Yeah,
I
no,
muted Aiden just to let you have the word.
I'm gonna back up what Aiden's saying because, under one of these rocks out here, there might be a little alien creature. It's a little worm guy, and so I can't say that there's not an alien creature under a rock because I haven't looked at all the rocks. So, so that argument is no longer scientific. I am coming from more of science, what I can observe, what we can test. Now,
And there's no scientific theory that says that life exists. That's
What's
not
Let him finish a thought.
so it is the total complexity because you guys, so everything you put it under the microscope. Okay, well, it is improbable that, and this is evolutionist too, it's improbable that the big expansion, it happened at just the right amount power, force, material that it gave us a universe that could support life. And so then you say, oh well, that could have happened. But then the chance of, and yeah, there's trillions of stars, but and again, get your mind into, you're going to design Aiden today in this planet. What would you have to have done billions of years ago, trillions of years ago, yesterday? What would you have to have done to have this happen? And so you can't then take, Dr. Dawkins with, his biology and say, well, these things could happen. It's improbable, but it could happen. And then abiogenesis, get back to those guys. Well, it's improbable, but it could have happened because it could have happened some way that we don't know about. And then the moon, yeah, if the moon wasn't there, Aiden wouldn't be here, but it happened. And then you just keep on going out. And then if we don't have, now we know if there wasn't quantum physics, Aiden wouldn't be here. So my argument is it's not.
Wouldn't it be crazy if I just evaporated right now as soon as you said that? I just ceased to exist.
I do that all the time when my internet falls out. So if I do that, it's not because you willed it.
For all we know, there could be a phase transition where you are right now, and you just poof, your atoms disintegrate.
Oh man! Don't say
no.
that to me. I don't need that right now, Andrew. I don't need that.
My whole argument is the totality.
I already have vacuum decay to worry about.
Of
the possibility.
Right.
The totality of the complexity, and with with the design hypothesis, you can't go. So you can't go, well, we could get life, so we don't need a God. But to get universe, galaxies, star, planets, it's layer upon layer upon layer. So you can't go individual. You got to do the whole package to get Dan or Aiden and the guys here. And that's where, and back to your statement, I agree with most of science. It's only, the only thing we'll disagree with is abiogenesis, is taking mutations, which we don't have. We do not have evidence of mutations in a massive amount of complexity to perform it.
What?
Take that, and then you take the symbiotic relationships. You take that dragonfly saw, because then
wait one topic at I'm gonna pull a Ken Hovind here. One topic at a time, Dan. One topic at a time. All right.
As the show guy, I'll let you do that.
You just cited that there's no evidence of mutations leading to more complex. I don't know what you mean by that. Because...
Oh, good. So you might have missed that. I gave the thing of, for years I've been telling people, so natural selection is nothing without mutations. Now, I think we can agree with that. And the theory goes that you have the mutations, so it's worked on by natural selection. And I agree with natural selection. My little puppy, there's an example of it. So, but without the quantity and quality of mutations, this is nothing. The natural selection, and to say that the biologist Richard Dawkins, and this was just in the 90s, would say, I punched a button. Oh, good, I'm still. He said that the best thing in all of the science was Richard Dawkins. I mean, Richard Dawkins, he was the one who said it. That Darwin came up with natural selection, and as a modern biologist, it's like that dude's on something, because without the mutation. So that's my question: is give me some peer-reviewed papers of small amount, 100,000 mutations, and I made the list. HIV, because the people are stretching. Lactose intolerance, the bacteria, that's a cool one, but bacteria, but lactose intolerance, and you had HIV and sickle cell anemia, and it's dudes. That's not you can't give me that stuff and have me even produce my dog have babies and breed it to get a red dog.
Those are different things, though. Those are very different. That's not exactly an honest equivalency right there. Okay, because when you talked earlier about environmental or natural selection, I wanted to cut you off, but I let you finish your point.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to let you get your point across. I disagree with the notion that you provided earlier that mutations are the primary mechanism by which natural selection propagates. They are one of the components that natural selection propagates through. But if I had to give one single thing that allows natural selection to propagate the way it does more than anything else, it's the environment. It's the environment being what it is, the climate being what it is within that environment. And the reason why I say that is because it's not just genetic adaptations that will lead to a higher survivability chance within creatures. It's also many times behavioral adaptations that a creature will have that it did not previously exhibit before. So there are many different components to natural selection that are entirely agenetic. They are entirely reliant on the environment, the conditions within the environment, and that creature's ability to be able to adapt within that environment. And sometimes an adaptation is beneficial when it is a mutation, but most of the times those adaptations are behavioral rather than muted.
Well, but my point was, well, let me just say quick. My point was, and that's why I brought back to the first simple life forms, which had to have added material. So, and mainly for that, it's mutations to get us to the point that there's enough genetic material in creatures today and in the past that could adapt if because say the Ice Age or whatever, if they didn't have some things in there that there was animals that could have the long fur, the environment would have just killed everybody. But they would have had the genetics inside of them from past mutations that were kind of latent or in different climates. But again, even that goes back to the mutations are needed for the genetic building blocks to be able to have the environment. To me then, and you can tell me why I'm wrong, but natural selection is on the same par as environmental conditions, because both of them, if the mutations didn't happen before.
Well, the environmental conditions precipitate the ability for those mutations to actually be beneficial or not. If the environment for the polar bear, some 10 to 15,000 years ago, was not an Arctic and tundra-centric environment that lends to the mutation that we find between polar and Kodiak bears, that gives them, they're not white as most people think of it as. It's not white fur, it's transparent fur. Translucent would probably be a better term for it. A translucent fur that gives them their whitish hue. That wouldn't have been beneficial for them if they had not been living in an environment where that would have given them more camouflage, so to speak. So if that very same mutation would have happened in a population of bears in, say, modern day Mexico 10 to 15,000 years ago, then that mutation may have existed on a temporary basis within a small population, but the odds of that mutation proliferating to a special level decreased dramatically because of the fact that it does not impart any advantage upon the
Doesn't get
offspring
fixated in the
produced
population.
with that. Exactly.
Kind of sounds like, and we had it with the explanation was used as evidence was somebody's moths. I think they call them Darwin's moths. That the genetic,
leopard moths?
yeah. So the genetic ability to have different colored moths was already in there from mutations before, and so when the bark darkened, if the story's right, then the light moths got picked off, but it wasn't a mutation at the time of the darkness. It was already mutated in them prior to that. So polar bears, then but you'd have to argue that, so like some of the brown bears and stuff, plus there's actually nothing that eats polar bears, so it wasn't really, but anyway, we can argue that, that's a different thing. But that would have, to me, from what I understand, I can be corrected, is that mutation had to have happened in the original bears, whether brown or whatever to begin with, and that once they went and hit the snows, hit that, then if there was a saber-toothed tiger, let's say they were around, whoever it was, that was killing off the brown bears in the snow, but that what it sounds like you're saying is that once the snow came or the bears went north, whichever one it was, is that mutations happened that changed those brown bears once the snow was there. I always thought with like the moths, the genetic material had already mutated prior. So then the natural selection worked on the mutations that were already in those bears. And then, so white bears would have picked off before. That wasn't that they weren't in the population, but they would have been picked off. So am I wrong in that? Or,
So this is, if I might jump in here, so this is why I brought up the term earlier in the side chat of what's called standing genetic variation, which is basically what you're describing here. So there's always some variation of a particular trait in a given population. And of course that different variants are generated by different mutations. But I think what Aiden was talking about, so I think you're both talking about different aspects of the same thing. You're, for example, talking about how that variation is generated to begin with, whereas Aiden is talking about that variation already exists within the population. Some of it may be at low frequency, some of it may be at high frequency, and one just kind of subsumes the other if the environmental conditions change.
Yeah, that's why I asked, is it the mutations happened after the bears got to the snow, or under my understanding, and you can tell I'm a horticulturalist, not an animal guy, is that that the mutations would have happened before in the things, and any white bears wouldn't have survived down in the forest. Or let's say, some creature bears are pretty rough.
It's essentially a form of albinism is what it is. I mean, we see albinism in other creatures as well, but we don't typically see it proliferate within a group. And the reason why we don't see it proliferate is because albinism, being albino, is not a characteristic that is conducive to a higher probability of surviving, which means that fewer creatures with that aberration will likely have offspring as a result of that, or their offspring will be less likely to survive themselves and carry that gene forward. But like I said before, that's only one part of the totality of what we're talking about, because like I said before, and what needs to really be also brought up here is behavioral adaptations are a huge part of why species will develop different anatomy over time. Anatomical shifts will result quite often from that. Pachycetus is a great example of that.
Can you back up? So what changes? Did you say no? Environment was the other one. What was this one?
Behavioral changes.
Behavior. Okay.
So when the environment.
If I can clarify something with you, Aiden, so when you're talking about behavioral changes, you're talking about more so like with your Pachycetus example. An organism, I guess not really choosing, but invading or encountering new circumstances, a new environment, rather than the behaviors that you see in like humans, for example. Because I guess what I was initially confused about when you were talking about behavioral traits is that some behaviors are at least indirectly genetically based on like hormone changes, etc. So I wasn't sure exactly what you were talking about there.
It's typically what I'm talking about in terms of behavioral changes. It's in the context of trying to exploit a gap within an environmental niche that otherwise hadn't been filled before. Yeah. So like the K2 extinction leading to the proliferation of mammalian species is a great example of that. Because there had been niches that had been occupied previously by reptilian species that now were left open for mammalian species to be able to fill, which led to those mammalian species exhibiting behaviors on a larger scale that they would not have otherwise exhibited.
Okay, I'd like to clarify because, you know, if the bears disappeared, sometimes I don't like people. I'd head in because there's not much big. I'd need something. You know, maybe wolves. Wolves and bears disappeared. So you're saying out of that niche, and then I could go take it over. But that's not a change in my genetics.
Right. That's the point I'm making. It doesn't require genetic changes to see massive changes in a creature over time in terms of their anatomical differences, because their behavior can also incentivize massive anatomical change as well. It's not just a genetic thing.
So you're saying then over time, if everybody disappears, which is making me happy because I like to be alone. Well, no, actually, I'd need some people with me, a few people I'd choose. But so I'm going over somewhere. The way they're going, Siberia might be cleared pretty soon. And I go over there. And so you're telling me that over generations and generations, just because I moved over there, my genetics would be different? I'm not understanding that. I'm serious.
To a certain extent, I guess you're kind of right about that. I guess a good example of that is actually something that you brought up earlier, which was sickle cell anemia, because sickle cell anemia is an example of a genetic aberration coming out of extreme environmental circumstances and conditions, those primarily being in sub-Saharan Africa, where malarial infection rates are much higher than in other parts of the world, and people are much more regularly exposed to malaria. That environmental difference over being there and being present for a sufficiently long period of time will allow genetic aberrations like sickle cell anemia not to be created, but to proliferate within the population. That's, I think, what you might be getting stuck on. We're not saying that the environment creates the genetic difference. We're saying that the genetic difference is proliferated because the environment is more conducive to those changes. Those changes would have been present within that creature anyways, no matter what the environment would have been. But if the environment facilitates those changes, like sickle cell anemia, in a more advantageous way, then that allows it to proliferate in a way that it would not have otherwise.
Yeah, and see, but the problem I see, and just because, you know, again, so for me to actually change, if I take my little colt and go to the mountains without the bears and the wolves and other people, because they could kill me faster.
Yeah, people are nasty.
But wouldn't I have had to have had genetic mutations to begin with? Are you saying that so because I moved to a different environment, then the genetic changes would happen?
No. I'm saying what you're talking about is the example I gave of behavioral, not genetic differences. So behaviorally, if you were to say, let's say that the land becomes so heavily exploited in the far future, like everything on the land, there's farmland everywhere, you can't grow any food or raise any food yourself. You have the choices of either dying because you don't have access to food anymore, or finding a new source of food. Those are basically your choices at that point. And most people, I would expect, would try and find a different source of food before they would just drop dead. So if you were on the coastline and you saw some fish or some shrimp or whatever it might be out there in the water, and you go out there and you go and grab that fish, and you go, oh, wow, this is a really reliable source of food. I go out there all the time now and I get my food. You go out there more and more frequently. And as you go out there, not you necessarily, but future generations from you will exhibit changes within their anatomy because they are spending so much time within that environment. Webbed feet are a great example of that. You know, people who spend a very prolonged time in aquatic environments will develop webbed feet. That's a very small change, obviously, in comparison to some of the more massive changes that we're talking about. But it is nonetheless an example of an adaptation to an environment that you would not have adapted to had you not had this new niche.
Okay, yes. So that's a good example, because coming out from a designer creator, so you're saying that so then web feet, that's a good example. Are you saying that to me want to make something? I think that'd be kind of cool. Did they already have the genetic information to do that, or is it still a mutation on their genetic code once they're out there to get those webbed feet? Do you see what I'm saying? It's not.
I think what he's saying is that these organisms already had a certain amount of variation or genetic variation that led to some phenotypic plasticity there, and then they encountered new environmental conditions due to behavior. What he's saying there, so that they're now encountering different selection pressures, different environmental requirements, basically, than they did before. So if another mutation, not necessarily related to the previous trait, to give the example, there are certain kinds of fishes alive today and that were alive in the distant past called lobe-finned fishes, basically, where instead of ray fins, their fins have this bony stump near the base of it. So they're kind of on their way to becoming limbs, essentially. And that helps them navigate certain environments underwater. But when they come across, say, the shoreline or a complex estuary type environment where having fingers and digits and having even stronger limb type appendages may be beneficial, if those subsequent mutations come along, they'll be selected for. So you kind of have this facilitated evolution going on of you exploit a particular niche and then subsequent variations kind of fine tune it from there.
Like, and not only just that, just real quick, just one real quick thing to add. They won't just be introduced, but over time they will be exaggerated as traits over time as well.
Right. Yeah.
So a great example of that, that I think all of us could agree is real because we have record of it historically, is the Habsburg jaw. You know, when you have a group of people that have a very small genetic pool to be able to work off of, very specific traits will express themselves much, much, much more quickly than they otherwise would if they were present within a much wider gene pool.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, but my
had
point
much
is
more genetic variability.
So part of design, you know, is the plan. You have to have the. Well, you don't, because I do have a plan. It's always up in my head, and I get yelled at because I can't express it that well. But so I need a plan to make those web feet, the bigger jaw. So to me, it sounds like, though, that both environment and what was the other one you said? The
behavioral change.
Behavioral. That seems to me, and explain why not, is that's more just another tool belt of the natural selection. There's natural selection.
Exactly. That is what I'm trying to say.
And mutation. Okay. So then, but you still have to have that's why I said the foundation has to be the mutations, the plan, the mutation, the DNA, the genetic code is like a plan, right? I mean,
not necessarily. I don't necessarily agree with that. Once again, off of the basis of what I was talking about before, when you're talking about the first life ever, they're talking about, by definition, the smallest population ever, the smallest amount of genetic variability ever in the history of life. So when we're talking about traits like the Habsburg jaw, a new quote unquote trait, a new genetic aberration being introduced under a very short period of time compared to when it would be in a much wider genetic pool, you can only imagine how much more that would be elevated when we're talking about a sample size of literally one. So genetic aberrations and genetic differentiation would only happen, I would only imagine would happen extremely commonly and extremely frequently. And I could also theorize, not say it's true, but theorize based on that the vast majority of the offspring of either the first or second few generations of life would have died out, and that only a very, very small percentage of those would have actually made it and proliferated into the life that we have today. And that's indicative of the story of life as we see it as a whole on this planet. I mean, the amount of biodiversity that we have right now on this planet is only a tiny fraction compared to the amount that we observe in things like the fossil record. The totality of different species that have existed on this earth is way larger than the amount that we currently have access to right now. And unfortunately, due to people, is shrinking more and more every day.
No, so I'm actually getting back to that design. So you're saying the jaws, because I mean, it's kind of evident, you know, the dogs, my dog here, if he goes to the desert, he's dead. He won't even sit with me a lot of times because he gets so hot. He's furry, he's part husky. And so, okay, it's a she. I was just corrected. And so then, but the jaw. So if she breeds with a short hair and I move to Arizona and there's not vets and not that stuff, her and the long hairs are going to die. But that, to clarify, to build like the jaw, aren't you saying that was already genetic material in the group, and then because
no, I'm saying that genetic aberration of an expressed jawline would have been there regardless, but would not have expressed itself as drastically and in as short a period of time had it been expressed in a much more wide pool of genetics rather than
you're talking about drift here, okay?
In a much more narrow pool of genetics.
So but you still need a plan. And so where was that jaw then? A new mutation, a new structural design? Because I can do that like
no. It's not new per se in that sense. I don't think that there's been anything that's been strictly new as you're talking about evolutionarily speaking. I think that what you're talking about are different adaptations and different takes on existing things that do eventually become seemingly entirely new over very large periods of time because of how much those traits become exaggerated.
Modifying existing traits.
Yeah, so it's modifying existence. So the information, the plan was already in those group of people. So like if I want big jawed ancestor kids and I take a group of people up and then I start bumping off the ones with small jaws like mine, so what it is it's already genetic material that's in there, right? That then because of the environment, because of their, you know, like up in Alaska, some of the people, their jaws are different from what they've done, or that might be the wrong example, but there's changes. So, but there has to be some information to do that. Or are you saying that my jaw, if I go away and start chewing on the right thing, and say I'm young because I don't have that many years, but that my jaw, if I chewed out and I'm a young kid, that by the time I'm my age in my 60s to 80s, that my jaw would be bigger and then I could reproduce with kids with bigger jaws? But
actually, what you're talking about is actually medically provable to a decent extent, because when people have different diets and access to variable diets, they do indeed express different traits like larger heights. Like we notice now that the average height of people is increasing. And the reasoning for that average height increasing is because we have better access to nutrients at an earlier age to be able to facilitate that growth. That's one of the reasons, but that also leads to more people born from tall people being taller themselves. As far as what you're talking about in terms of having a plan or anything like that is concerned, I don't think that there was a plan in the strict sense. We're just talking about creatures' abilities once they already exist, because we're talking about proliferation from the first life form. I think we can agree that evolution doesn't deal with how the first life form got here. It deals with how things diversified from that first life form.
Well, and it had to add a lot of genetic information to get the complexity. I mean, even if we didn't have the mass extinctions, from that first life to the creatures that are already extinct, there's a huge diversity, which would have taken. So let's say it, and somebody gave the thing and they said 200, things had to be there to begin with for reproduction, energy, eating, all that stuff. Let's say it's 2,000. Let's give them a big number. But so to get to the human or not to the strawberry, I don't care what it is, you have to have more genetic information, not more complex, just more.
You have to have more genes. I would agree with that. There are indeed more genes in a strawberry than there are in a person.
Right.
Or in
And
a
so
bacteria.
Isn't that through mutation though?
Part of it is, yes. But getting back to what you were talking about in terms of the complexity of the first single-celled organism, the first life compared to the next generation that came after it, you need to understand that the amount of environmental niches that were available to those first life forms were more numerous than any other time in history because none of them were filled. None of them were filled by anything at that point whatsoever. There was all this free energy from things like the hydrothermal vents at the very bottom of our oceans or solar radiation coming from our sun that was getting dumped onto this planet all over the place, and nothing was taking advantage of it prior to that. So the fact that there's all of these new different things that they can take advantage of, and within a few generations, we see multicellularity even in laboratory settings develop even within just a few generations of single cell life. When we get multicellularity, you open up a whole new environment of niches because then you can begin preying upon other forms of life. Then you can start preying upon things that exist that are living rather than just free energy sources that are within the environment. So the amount of niches that are available increases even more.
So good. I got a question there then, because so you have all these creatures, they diversify by mutation or niche or copying air in their original genetics. So then the ones that were just sitting there sucking on the vents then had to adapt a whole system to then be little carnivores and eat their brothers. Well, they weren't brothers. Okay.
Well, some of them did, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I won't jump on you. I'm really sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. No, and I was trying to be a joke, but that wasn't funny. So, but to get the genetics from all the guys that are just consuming, whatever, the simple, material. So some of these stayed doing that because they were in their niche and they were doing fine. And some of them developed the structure and the mechanism to chomp on these guys and digest them. They're no longer digesting just pond water. I mean, anyway.
Yeah, that's where we think the mitochondria came from.
Right. And so, but to get to the genetics, these guys over, which now I can't remember which hand it was, the guys that are only the original guys are just eating all that stuff. Well, some of those guys had to have mutations that developed a digestive system. And even if it's a billion years, it doesn't matter, to eat the other guys. So these guys, forget my hands. The simple guys that are just eating what they had, the original guys, had to actually backwards. The guys that are starting to eat the original guys had to have more information in the genome to produce a digestive system that now ate other little organisms.
Well, have more energy to be able to do that with.
Correct, but they need more genetic information. Those
right,
first
but it wasn't all on a single step, though. It wasn't a single mutation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that's why I said, even if it's a billion years, there's more genetic information to build a system of digestion, even if it's first they started eating these others' toes and, parts of the whatever. But it still is more genetic. Stop the hands. It's more genetic information than the first simple did. So, you have these, say 200, let's say 2,000, whatever. The guy that's eating his buddies or his ex, whatever, eating the other guys, he has to have more genetic material to create and build. And I'll use a create in a thing of just design wise, just in general. He has to have more information to establish that. So that little guy with less information, we had to add the information, even if it's over a lot of generations. So you're saying that 250 to 2,000, whatever it is, the small number that wouldn't be needed for first life, you had to have the mechanism to get more information in that little guy. And so without mutations, that's not going to happen. I say, because if you go in your own niche and you're eating, vent pollution, you're not, just because you moved to someplace else, you still need that information to build that system, even if the niche provides more food for you to eat.
The only thing that you really need as far as information at that point is just a receptacle for energy, heat energy in this particular instance. That's all that you really need. It's not complex in the way that I think that it's, of course, complex in the way that I said that all life is complex at the outset of things. But I don't think it's as complex as what you might be portraying it as. And I don't necessarily think it needs to be additional genes. It certainly is in plenty of instances, but I don't think it needs to be all the time. I think that there's times where we observe that maybe there's not new genes being added, but the genes that were there changed due to things like copying areas, like what you were talking about.
But eventually, and that's my point in design, is where, again, taking one little something, if you take the whole broad thing, you did develop, and then the body types in the Cambrium, the legs pop out. That is more information than a guy with that's just floating around. That is definitely information. But there's thousands of those things, millions of the changes that first little life could not have done if it didn't change. If some of its offspring, I'm trying, I try to use the right terminology because I don't want to be ignorant creationist. But so the ancestors or whatever of the simple guy, hands on my, I'm an Italian, you can tell I love my hands.
It's all right, don't worry about it. You're all right. You're all right.
I'm annoying myself though, so I could imagine. So, but what I'm saying is that as a builder, to then not just see it the one little niche, but we're talking about then fins, then legs, then plants. Plants are like, like, I'm tired of this pollution from the vents. I'm just going to get it straight from the sun. Photosynthesis. And it's like, well, good for you, buddy. But that takes more information. That takes different information. And the multitude. So your simple explanation one time was, and I had it, I don't even know what applies now, but like on my ponds, I can adjust. They adjust in like a niche or social. If my pond is like dripping and I designed it for more, I can turn that pump up or turn it down if it's spilling over the edge and spilling. So, but that still needs information in that pump. Not all pumps do that. So what I'm saying, from that simple life, and not just a single change to something, digestion, but you've got so you, again, the complexity of that simple guy that or less complex guy that can't do legs, somebody he's related to had to have changes, had to have added information to digest. And then those plants popped around, or maybe the plants popped around first, but it's like, wow, now we got some cool thing we can eat.
Hey, Dan?
Yeah.
May I want to, at this stage in the conversation, I feel like it's prudent for me to try and summarize your contention of things to make sure that I have a decent understanding of your point of view. So I'm going to try to do that, and you tell me how close or far off the mark I am. Okay?
Good. I like your voice better than mine anyway, so go ahead.
Oh gosh, don't even. Your voice is perfectly fine. No, I feel, given what I've heard from you, that your contention in this discussion is that the amount of mutations that it would take to see the amount of diversity in life that we find today would have to happen over a truly immense amount of time, or it's either that, or I might have heard you earlier saying that we don't have data to say that mutations happen over a quick enough period of time. to be able to facilitate that, or they don't happen frequently enough to be able to facilitate that. I believe that those were also points of your content. I believe that the essence of what you're saying is
Keep going.
that
It makes me sound smarter than I am, but I kind of agree with that stuff. But I don't think yeah, go ahead.
Well, to refute that, even if it isn't your contention, to refute that, I would simply have to go back and cite the examples I did earlier, in that when you have a smaller amount of genetic diversity, when you have a smaller gene pool in a population to be able to draw upon, you will see proliferation of that change. Those changes that you're talking about, those mutations, those giant leaps and bounds and different changes, like the Habsburg jaw being a genetic aberration that happens way more quickly or way more frequently within smaller genetic populations than it would in a regular one. The same goes for giant changes happening in the earliest stages of life because their population was so low, as well as the fact that the amount of niches that they had to be able to exploit were so high. Those two things were basically a double whammy that allowed for things to be able to proliferate and to be able to cover those niches at a rate that I do agree with you, we just would not be able to observe today. So I feel like the only way that I could show you genuinely that kind of like that change, that proliferation at the rate that you're talking about, would be if we could somehow replicate those conditions and replicate an environment somewhere where we could have that many niches available for this life to be able to exploit in an environment where there is no other competition whatsoever. I don't know if we could do that in Earth. Maybe we could do that genuinely. Maybe I think the only place we might be able to do that is somewhere like the International Space Station or something like that, where we could have as good a guarantee as possible that life up there is isolated and not being contaminated by anything. But I feel like those are the best conditions to be able to answer your question. And maybe if that's unreasonable, then I'm sorry if that sounds like a dodge or something. But I think given the conversation that we've had, I think that's a reasonable response.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of just a simple creator. And so no matter, in the question though that, so if in horticulture, so I can actually see in nature sometimes a little sport pop out. You get variegated, and usually it's not a good thing, but we like it because it's pretty. And so, but there's something in the plant that changed. And so, like your simple creature, though, because I like those little dudes with all the eyes and that were in the Cambrium.
Yeah.
I want to create.
Are one of my favorite.
Thank you. Gosh, see, that's why I love you. So, I want to make one of those puppies. And so, but you're telling me that I'm going to start out with something that's sucking on pollution. Well, it's food. It's pollution to me. A lot of Asian food that I've turned out is not for me. And I will play you. You're not going to get me to eat us.
Okay, that joke was a little funny, Dad.
Yeah, that one. No. So, then, But so as a designer creator, and even in a specific, not the whole picture of all the trillions of stuff that need to change, but just to give me that trilobite guy. And so even without the eyes, they're cool. I can paint on the eyes if I want. So I'm going, and so, but the information on that little single cell guy, even if it's a 2 billion years past, you still have to add the plan, the genetics that then the organism builds onto.
So are you familiar with the term neofunctionalization by any chance?
Oh, of course. That I did my PhD on that. No, go help me out. Thank you.
So this kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier about gene duplication events. So basically what you have is, when cells divide, of course, the DNA has to be replicated, but there are often mistakes, and even big ones where certain sections of it, entire gene, for example, is copied by mistake. Originally, it doesn't really do anything because you already have another copy of the gene that works. So there's no selection on that new copy from accumulating new mutations. And some of those mutations might be bad, but some of them might be good or beneficial. and in such a way that they create a new gene that does something new. So that's why it's called neofunctionalization. So that's one mechanism by which you get new genes from old ones, but they can now do novel functions compared to the old copies. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, totally. And so, and then again, though, as a designer, and I'm just saying a trilobite, but the amount of differences, because I actually really want to design the dragonfly, you know, it's like, and so it's like one we can kind of play with, and it's like, okay, add some stuff here, go there, some genome duplication and stuff. We're talking about trillions upon trillions upon trillions. And so my thought is, and that's why I asked for a list of mutations, we got a multitude of different species. And you would think you could give me a list of more than a couple of highlights being HIV and sickle cell anemia, because take the sickle cell anemia. I have some friends, they do missions in Uganda, and man, malaria is messed up. But if they're isolated, and so all the people go sickle cell anemia because they haven't died off with the malaria, then within a few generations, all that population dies because of that mutation that was beneficial. So in the long run of the species in that area, if that was the only pocket of people in the world, they're extinct. And so HIV/AIDS, yeah, you might not get West Nile virus. Woohoo! I'll stay away from Egypt. Actually, it's here too, so I'm just joking. But you know, to give me, you still, even that simple guy that gets to the trilobite, even if there is other things of just the environment, I'll give you those. But from what I've heard from scientists, the foundation is the mutations. Majority of change is mutations.
There's always a give and a take with that, though. There's not, when it comes to those sorts of adaptations, you know, and I think something that I don't think has been brought up yet in the conversation, that especially given how mutation-centric this conversation is, definitely bears mentioning, is that not only are the vast majority of mutations more harmful than they are good, but I don't think that you could point to a single mutation that is entirely beneficial or entirely harmful. There's always some sort of give or some sort of take occurring somewhere within that. There's some sort of, you know, there's some sort of genetic entropy, so to speak, taking place.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit there, but yeah, a lot of mutations are like that. But that's another conversation, I guess.
I mean, like, yeah, we could definitely talk about that another time. My essential point is that I think that, especially my first statement of that the vast majority of mutations do more harm than they do good, and that's why they're not selected for within populations, and why those mutations typically are not multi-generational.
Right, they're usually trade-offs that kind of, you have to optimize things to an extent.
Yeah, that's more what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's still, but still on the picture of me design, because it's really the dragonfly, man. That sucker is so cool that, you know, if you, it was that's like the space shuttle of little bugs, but still, you know, that's more than just like, you know, you put me in the same environment and I'm not going to grow wings. That has to be information in the plan of their body. Then you go to the complexity of metamorphosis, and it's like some dude down the line, one of your other parts of the tree, he was just laying eggs in the water and popping out. And then but on the dragonfly, and all those that do metamorphosis, when you lay that egg, the genetic information for the dragonfly out of water still has the information for the little dude in the water chewing on stuff. So it's a total transformation. The genetics of the little, and you guys can correct me, it's the cute little guy in the water, actually not very cute, but he totally goes into mush like a butterfly, or like the caterpillar goes into mush, but the information, you pull that sucker apart and he has no parts. You squish him, And I've been known to do that with caterpillars when they're in my plants, but I didn't say that. There's just mush in there. And then within a few days, or not, whatever time frame, you've got then a totally different creature. And so that's what I'm saying is the layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of information that guy has in his little cells, in his eggs, it is like if that was the only thing on Earth, I would say, wow, that was a cool chance existence. But still, on the whole thing of designing, you guys haven't given me information that I'm going to get even my trilobite, because it's not observable right now, and so it should be. It should have you should give a list of mutations that are showing me.
That's not true. We can give you a list of mutations. You are just going to reply to that list of mutations. That those lists of mutations don't explain the proliferation of life and genetic diversity as we see it today. To which I would heartily agree with you and tell you that the reason for why that is the case is because the environmental conditions that allowed that to propagate in the first place are not the environmental conditions that we currently live within. We're living in the end result of that, and that end result changes every single day.
But we do see mutations. Horticulturalists, like, I mean, you guys can say,
of course, and that's what I'm saying.
The diversity.
But your contention is that they don't happen often enough for these giant changes to occur, is it not?
Well, because as a builder, so I've come to displays before, and I'm competitive, I'm professional, I'm going and I lay out my material, and I've got, I messed up. I only got enough material for 500 square foot, 600 square foot garden, but I have 1,000 square foot garden that I'm going to be judged on. I can't, I have to go get new material. I can't space it out. I can't, tweak it around. Because of the purpose of this garden, and so it has to have some new stuff in. But we do see a lot of these billions. You guys can give me a number of actually creatures on the Earth, and all we do observe is them changing.
But Dan,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Keep going. Just finish your thought. Finish your thought. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. I really felt a need to jump on what you were saying there, but you were totally mid-thought. That was really rude of me. I'm sorry.
See, but I can get away with you can get away with that with me because I can't remember what I was saying. But I do have something before we get too long, and because this will be great for people to use in putting them to sleep.
It's already been 3 hours.
You can continue.
Just getting started. No, I'm just kidding.
You know me, guys. You know me. So, that's why I can't find it. It's on my phone. See, they said I overthought, and I really did. So, kind of the final from and I really like him. I like smart people. Dark Dawkins.
What are you doing hanging out with me then?
Oh, come on now. Just be quiet, and you'll be smart in my eyes. And what else does it matter unless I think you're smart?
Dawkins.
Yeah. So Dawkins, it's like, although atheism might have been intellectually tenable before Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Now, to me and I know a lot of my, theist friends, and it's like, I agree with you guys. They're comfortable in their theism to project the science to conform with their worldview. And so, besides all those other quotes from Dawkins, that he's admitting that life in this universe is very unlikely, but his argument was God is more unlikely. That's not a good scientific argument. But then when he's honest, and that's why I like him, is that when, or at least he says what he thinks, and that's cool, but that to be and I'll say it again because it's sad to me, but although atheism might be intellectually tenable before Darwin made it possible to be intellectually fulfilled atheist. Now I go then with his comment that he's like hanging on natural selection when I might be wrong, but I thought it was really the genetics along with natural selection that really, that natural selection by itself was like, okay, that's kind of weak. Let's not talk about it. But when genetics came along with natural selection, it's like, whoa, the neo-Darwinism popped in. But when you've got a high-end scientist that is really preaching atheism, who front loads tell you that his belief in Darwin makes him intellectually fulfilled, is kind of, to me, kind of like the creationist or the guy that's just holding on God did it. And so a lot of these things of, as a designer, is, no, I need those pieces. I need pieces to produce things. And in the beauty of creation, we have like thousands and thousands of all these different body types. And so it kind of, you can see in my mind, I'm thinking, what's in that trilobite? How could that be built? Of course, I'm doing it with styrofoam, but what would I need if it needed to be? That's a thing. Oh, my daughter got mad at, she was sad. I was creating I don't know if it was a fish or something undersea when we had undersea, and got a tendon. That was a booger. But I stay away from styrofoam and knives now. But that's it.
Yeah. I was just gonna say real quick before we get too far afield of the original point I was trying to get off. Before we kind of went off on that. And I'm not saying this is a bad tangent. I am actually really enjoying it.
I like tangents. You go back to, that was a tangent too, I think. So
no, that's a tangent of a tangent. Don't worry. We can unravel that in Matryoshka doll another time, I'm sure. But no, I think that your contention about genetic diversity and proclivity of life on the planet as we see it right now to be diverse, I think that would be a perfectly valid contention in a world where proliferation of mutations and environmental niche behavioral changes coinciding with genetic changes with mutation was at a constant rate. If it was at a constant rate that didn't change and didn't shift in any way, shape, or form, and we could observe that rate never changed, regardless of any circumstance, I think that you would have a point, but that's not what we observe. We observe that there are absolutely environments where massive changes occur over very short periods of time, like the proliferation of mammalian species after the last mass extinction event that we had 65 million years ago being a great example, versus environments that have been relatively static and unchanging for many, many, many millions of years longer than that. The hagfish being a great example of a species that has been relatively unchanged, really at all, in any way, significant shape or form for many hundreds of millions of years, because the environment that they've been living in and the circumstances that they've been living in have been static or relatively static for long enough that they haven't had any sort of major change happen to them. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is because when a major mutation happens within a hagfish in an environment that doesn't incentivize that kind of change, then that mutation isn't selected for, behavioral changes aren't selected for, and new niches are not opening for that species left and right, because the environment is relatively stable compared to other environments that we observe. So the point that I'm ultimately making to you is that it's not a linear progression. It's not just something that we see in a static progression over time. This is something that will slow down or will speed up depending on the environment that is available for this. And that's why I said at the onset of this discussion that if I had to attribute one single thing to natural selection, it wouldn't be mutations, it would be the environment.
Right. I think the big point then here is that you don't get change or necessarily, I hate to, not necessarily directed, but adaptive change, let's just say, from strictly mutations, and you don't get it from strictly environmental changes without some variation already being present. So you kind of need hand in hand there. So I think that's kind of the big point that we were kind of
Yeah, it's a
seem to be a
confluence
little
of
bit
those
talking. Right. Yeah. It seems like we were agreeing on aspects of the same thing, but not kind of putting it all together, which I think is a fair point, Dan. That
Yeah,
we
I mean,
do
and
need to consider the
it's
whole
new to me
picture.
because, like, as a designer, so I can see the concept of mutations being able to change the plan, and I'm just saying generic terms that I can wrap my hand, just like the skyscraper, my head around. Is that still the genetics have to be increased? The plan has to be increased. And so you're saying, well, okay, the niches added stuff, the mutations added stuff, and now that we're
they didn't add it in and of itself. That's not true. They facilitated those things happening more often. It's not that those things, like, it's not that the environment flipped a switch somewhere and those things happened. It's just because the environment was the way that it was, it allows those things to happen either more or less frequently, depending on how frequently the environment is changing.
Okay, so so what I'm understanding is that we have mutations, which I thought was the big one for giving me my little parts to build new stuff, but
it's a huge one. It's just one of them, not the only one.
Okay, so but isn't that majority through mutation, or am I wrong in that?
I think that me and Andrew have been trying to explain, it's a combination of almost like a trifecta of three things. It's a combination of mutations, yes, being one of those things, niches and availability of niches being one of those things, and the overall condition and state of the environment as a whole being the third one of those things. Those three things, the trifecta of those three things, will come together to produce how much or how little those changes that you're talking about, those design changes that you're trying to talk about, the information, how frequently it's going to be added or how frequently it's going to be changed. It's going to happen more often in an environment that enables those things to happen. Like, there's going to be a lot more coal miners going to a place with coal than there is to a place where there is no coal whatsoever, right? It's only natural that people go where the resources are. The same thing is true for those changes. Those changes are going to seek out, so to speak, that's not that they actually have intent, but in an almost metaphysical sense, they seek out the environment to be able to facilitate that change. Otherwise, it just won't carry on. If it does happen, then it will not be selected for. It won't carry on to the next species, or at the very least, it's less likely that it will be selected for.
Okay, so you're saying then, and you don't have kind of a number. I just assumed, and that's where I'll say right out front. That's because I've been, school in the 70s, 60s. I was kind of like, I didn't kind of get it, but grammar school. But 70s high school, I was kind of getting into biology. Not just the girls, but that was a big part of the biology. And then but from there, so I've been interested in this stuff because when I first got that saved, when I first believed what the Bible said, and the Bible, what it said actually paralleled in my life. I got people telling me, like, there's just dealing with Christianity. I got into other religions, but saying Christianity, and then you've got like the Muslims or the Mormons. And then, so I said, well, I'm just human, so let me have it. Do you really guys think that God the Father, actually us can become gods and go have our own planet and populate it if we have enough wives? And they're going, when you actually confront them with their literature, they go, yeah, that's what we believe. And so it's like, well, no, that's not really driving what this book that gave me this feeling of the love, joy, peace, all the things that it said it would, and then other religions too, and going through that. So, and I'm open then to, like, I don't have any PhDs, so it's just my experience. So, but still, what is really complexing is that, so say me, I have, you guys can probably get the straight number because I'm million, trillion, I think it's billions of bits of the little dudes in the DNA, the little guys.
Nucleotides?
Yeah. And so there's billions of those, and then they're wrapped up. And then we have epigenetics that, will, stop me from, I wanted to be I didn't want to be a basketball player, but stop me from being the size of a linebacker. But the genetics in me and the epigenetics, stop you at a short guy. And so, with that,
is it that no short people play basketball, or is it that short people are less likely to play basketball because tall people have a more natural advantage at playing it than short people? It's not that no short people can succeed in playing basketball. It's just that short people are less likely to succeed in basketball and therefore are less likely to
but actually the shortest, and I switched to football because basketball is for tall guys, and because actually the smallest guys in professional basketball are still taller. They're under 6 feet, but they're definitely over me.
Right, but the point that I'm making ultimately isn't that in the same. It was an analogy for genetics. Basically, it's that just because something is more predisposed.
Just to tag in real quick, we've been going for 4 hours now. And I know you've got to be tired, Dan. And also, P-Town is about to start his show. Do you guys want to wrap it up?
And so,
sure, yeah, I can make a closing statement. I'm sorry, Stephen.
And then you guys can vote if you think, because I told Steven, it's like, yeah, I'll do a show because I'm really jived about this, as you guys know. The whole creation and design and all that stuff. So I told him I'll do a show, and then if more people want to come back and talk, I'll do more. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I guess the closing remark that I'll make for the show. Thanks for letting me know, by the way, Stephen. I won't try to cut into P-Town's time or anything. I'm sure you'll have a great show tonight. My closing remark will be that while I think that your contentions here, Dan, are certainly very interesting, I feel like ultimately they are, while educated, not necessarily informed in the entirety of you're almost there in terms of answering what you need answered. The information that you are looking for to answer your questions are out there, and it does exist. But I feel like part of the reason why you're not finding it is because the way that you are pursuing it is almost from a perspective as though it cannot be. It can't be. It's impossible that could have occurred within this span period of time. Or if it isn't, then show me when it is. And I feel like me and Andrew have done an adequate job of reasonably explaining that while we can show you what is going on in the modern context, what's happening right now, and why the environment is the way that it is right now, the further back in time that we go in trying to show you and explain to you why those things are, the harder and the murkier that image is in terms of actually being able to portray. It's not to say that we don't have any idea of those things, but the image gets fuzzier as time goes on because the information that we have access to gets less and less abundant.
Yeah. I do think you are asking some good questions, so.
Yeah, no, I do as well. And I think your questions are extremely valid. And I think that those questions helped to facilitate an extremely interesting discussion. So off the back of everything I just said, thank you very much for doing that, Dan. I really appreciate it. And I think this was a great
it's been a good discussion.
Oh, sweet. And I needed Claude, though. He needed to, slap me up some. This is so comfortable. Yeah. And so, again, though, so my faith really doesn't hinge on the 6,000 year. I mean, my faith comes from, being this good guy that was really starting like, wow, I got some mean tendencies in me. I'm not perfect. And then through hearing scripture and like that, it's like, wow, there is a creator that will forgive me of this. And so I said, I had a conversation with God, and I never did drugs. So it wasn't that. I was like, come on, God, if I'm that bad, show me. because I was like, hey, giving him pushback. And then, you know, it wasn't even sleep, but I just see this like door open. And if you guys have ever cleaned a septic system, I don't recommend it. Say you never can do it because I'm that stupid. I'll say, I'll do. Yeah, sure. I'll do it for you. You go in and slosh up the soup if it gets hard in a septic system. And I do have a good nose. And so I have no excuse why I even volunteer for that. But, you know, that was what I saw of myself. And that's why, and I apologize. It might've been you, Aiden, or I think it was Big Bad Mama of you know, saying how, oh, your darkness. And I apologize. You know, this is my experience and I didn't pref it that way. All I saw was somebody who was trying to be good, trying to be a good clog in the environment, in my tribe, in the community, in the herd. And, you know, this,
check the private